Hello, and welcome to User Experience for Web Developers, video course by Pack Publishing. My name is Chris Becker, and I will be your guide through the foundations of user experience through the 10 sections of this course. A little about me to set the stage. I'm a user experience designer, interaction designer, design researcher, and educator, with a BFA in graphic design from Colorado State University and a master's degree in media design from the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California. I have over 10 years of experience in design and reside in Los Angeles, California, where I have been working with advertising agencies, startups, and SaaS companies to build and develop great user experiences through the web and mobile platforms. Let me give you a brief overview of what the UX for web developers is about. In this course, you will become familiar with the fundamental skills, tools, and methodologies associated with building great user experiences for the web. The course is broken into 10 sections that build on each other towards a goal of applying UX processes to your development practices. Upon completion of the course, you will find your new UX skills will be useful in your current and future jobs. We will start with some overview to get us all on the same page as to what UX is, how it is applied, and where it is applicable. We will then learn some tools, mostly software, then some tricks of the trade, user flows, information architecture, and wireframes. And we'll finish by building out a responsive web project with a clickable prototype for testing and iteration, and have fun along the way. Throughout the course, you will learn UX principles and skills which will improve your development process and allow you to create awesome experiences. You will create and maintain a web prototype, build user testings, and iterate your designs. So let's get going. In this section, we will review why user experience design is valuable, explore some fundamental values, relate to some history, and get us on the same page. We will then finish with some UX community resources that will help us all stay in the same conversation. In this video, we're going to take a look at some visualizations of how we see UX, some skills and things that UX people do, some of the history that is associated with our practice, and some resources that will keep us all on the same conversation. So let's get going. Take a look at this diagram. As you can see, user experience lies at the center of a large number of skills, technical prowess, and educational skills, and is formed from the intersection of three main entities: business in the red, technology in the green, and design in the blue. This Venn diagram attempts to show what a UX designer must consider and how their skill sets can be applied across these three verticals. UX is the intersection of systems, so you will find there are many ways to visualize UX, but the importance being it's the intersection. Here's another diagram. This tree diagram shows that user experience design applies the combination of human psychology, human-computer interaction, design thinking, graphic design, UI design, product design, development, with a splash of technology management and business acumen. We'll be touching on many of these branches in the UX in later sections. What's unique is you can see that the root of great user experience spreads across a wide array of educational verticals and skills that can combine to help synthesize a better experience. User experience has become an emerging profession through the pervasive use of the internet, networked technologies, and computer software. Take a look at this media usage from an old Wired article. Our usage of screen computers, televisions, and phones is constantly changing as all things are becoming networked and ubiquitous. This makes UX all the more relevant as it is a collection of human-centered design skills that are built on the values of learnable, usable, and useful systems. We need to become knowledgeable about what motivates human beings in order to build experiences for them, as good user experience design saves money and creates value. A good UX design makes people want to use the product, And when they use the product, they buy more, and then they can recommend it to their friends. Let's take a look at the UX skills matrix. You observe that user experience designer has many skill verticals. Throughout this course, we will be concentrating on just a few verticals of this matrix. The business context analysis, some usability engineering, user experience planning, some information architecture, and some interaction design. Now you might ask the question, where do all these UX skills come from? So let's review quickly a few of our UX founding fathers. IDEO, company to the left, is a global product design firm out of San Francisco that is famous for deploying design thinking practices and innovative solutions. Bill Morgridge, a founding partner of IDEO, is the grandfather of UX, as he built the first laptop computer and realized that the importance of the screen to be an experience, i.e. the birth of interaction design. In this next slide, Don Norman, on the left, is a writer, theorist, and educator who wrote the book Design of Everyday Things that places observation and form making upon the core of interaction design. Jacob Nielsen, on the right, is a web standards proponent and an early HTML pioneer and responsible for all links being blue with an underline. He also created the heuristics evaluation matrix, which is a concept of measuring systems we will be applying to our web design later in this course. Steve Jobs, who we all know, knew the power of a great experience. His platform ushered in the graphical user interface to the personal computing revolution, and the platform which has since been applied to other objects, including iTunes, music, and mobile technologies of apps and devices which have become pervasive in our world. Johnny Ive has taken up his torch and now builds and oversees the product design and software design at Apple, and embodies the same innovation spirit of Steve Jobs, placing design and design thinking at the heart of making great products and experiences. There are many, many more that continue to define and make the role of UX and the practitioners in it. However, it is a rapidly growing field, and the advances in education, design tools, development strategies, and open source platforms, along with entrepreneurialism and management processes, have created a growing need for the skills of great user experience. In the end, UX has impact on the bottom line, and as more and more businesses are being confronted by the changing business landscape, great UX helps smooth those bumpy seas. Since UX is ever evolving and ever changing, and the field of new technologies and new form factors, new platforms, new products, new problems are all around the corner. Here are a few resources for you to keep up to speed with what's going on in the UX and technology community. There's UXPA, which is an organization for user experience designers. There's a blog, which is UX Matters and UX Mag and UX Booth. There's also more specific for web designers, which is Web Designers Depot. It has UX things. Smashing Magazine, if you're not familiar, has a user experience related content piece. There's UX Designer, is more about design in UX, and then there's IA.net, which is about information architecture, and then the design community and technology community of Core 77. This is a small grouping, and there's many, many more. Spend some time poking around the conversations, articles, and examples of great UX. A good user experience designer should be like an endless sponge, ever soaking up what is happening in design, business, and technology. In the next video, we will get into the fundamentals of building a website. Welcome back. I hope you have started familiarizing yourself with the UX world and the conversations that are happening online and on blogs. I know it can feel like a fire hose worth of information, so don't feel overwhelmed. We are going to start by learning about a few UX skills and get at some of the fundamentals for building a website under our belts. In this video, we'll be reviewing the web design process, talk about the agile development cycle, review user-centered strategies, personas, and user profiles, find some business objectives, relate and organize some information architecture, sitemaps, and build out some web technology and responsive framework knowledge. So let's get moving on these web fundamentals. Web design follows a multi-step process. Take a look at this 6-step process. From discover to manage and grow, it follows steps that can be repeated and copied to build and make for successful websites. User experience skills, tools, and thinking weaves their way into each aspect of the journey to produce better, faster, more reliable, and usable outcomes. Learning and repeating a process is about maintaining quality and helping solve problems. Take a look at this diagram for agile development, which allows us to build cost-effective software quickly. Agile considers an iterative process that allows for testing and course adjustment as you move through development. Solutions are broken off into sections rather than all at once, allowing for the agile cycle to complete and iterate quickly. If you maintain trust in a method, you will be able to monitor, speed up, and repeat success. During the invent and build sections of a website, teams that design can rely on an agile design cycle to make and build better websites, products, or services. Like any problem, the first place is where to start. When thinking like a UX designer, that means starting with your user and getting to understand what are their needs, what are their existing issues, what do they love, hate, and what do they want. When solving web design problems, we need to keep in mind that users are people, and if we understand their motivations, we can help them through better solutions and thus better experiences. If you know your audience, you can then build for their needs. The importance of thinking of your user as a relationship and not a transaction, because essential in building value is what is part of making a great experience. User experience is a conversation, an exchange of ideas. If you never learn who and why your users are, then you will make personal assumptions, which could be potentially costly and wrong for your users. To understand your end user, it is useful to build user profiles or personas. Take a look at these two examples. Each persona lays out a few key aspects in keeping your audience under consideration. There's their name, gender, user quote, and personality. There's how good they are at technology and user traits. Think about and building for your user requires empathy. And when your goals and the goals of your user become aligned, you can accomplish a great experience for them. Personas can be short and sweet or in-depth and detailed. Either can help you in thinking about your users, which becomes extremely important when building websites and maintaining great user experiences. Now that we have our user in mind, what comes next is planning and interpretation. To build a great plan, you have to know what is the problem. The budget, scope of work, then, what are the technology requirements, the timeline. If the problem is business X needs to update their e-commerce website to capture more sales online, then you start by defining a KPI. A KPI is a key performance indicator. It is a benchmark for defining success and becomes an anchor point when thinking through a problem. An example of a KPI is business needs 1,000 more sales a month. Since UX helps solve problems, it is recommended to translate business KPIs, like the one we discussed above, into human-centered KPIs. The business KPI equals increase sales by 1,000, while a UX KPI would be help more users complete their checkout process in fewer and clearer steps, making the KPI human-centered. Business wants more people on their site, more visual on a product equals more purchases, which equals more money. A UX designer recognizes that people buy stuff, and if you help that user with the checkout process, it will lead to more sales for the business. Once your KPI is set, and you have defined a user-centered goal, now we can start defining what needs to change, should be redesigned, UX, what the UX is, or build a new site to achieve that KPI or goal. For a website, we would start by defining the structure through a sitemap. A sitemap is information architecture and is a task that breaks down a list of pages for a website that are accessible by crawlers and users. Sitemaps help us define the number of pages, content types, the higher level hierarchy of the website pages. Take a look at this example. Sitemaps help structure and define the potential pages, as well as how many templates we would need to be considered in order to get all the content located on the site. The sample shown shows a sitemap for a boutique hotel and outlines 10 template types for each major navigation header. Page and templates are similar, however, templates can be used multiple times by many pages. Templating websites allows us to keep design and development time down, which can help control the cost of a website. We will be using our website maps soon, as UX starting out is highly concentrated on structure and organization. Now we're starting to cook with some fire. Once you have some basic web structure taking shape, you can start defining some technical aspects of your website. Any website has 3 layers that make up the technology that need to be considered. Let's start from the inside out. But remember that UX design starts first and is augmented by tech and dev. It is a conversation, as all parties have to come together to build a great experience. The data layer, what kind of content, images, whether they're JPEGs, GIFs, TIFFs, or PNGs, whether it's video, copy, how is it stored, how big is it, etc. This data layer requires us an understanding of media type and what the user is going to do with that media and data. Number 2, the backend, the code base of how that content gets served up and interacted with by a web browser and a user. This code base applies the logic and order of how users engage with a website. Backend technology also allows us to maintain and update content management for any particular site. The last, and sometimes sexiest of these, is the front end, the UI and the design. It's the look and feel. This is how a content from your server looks on your browser. The back end is the closet. The front end is how it gets assembled and shown to the world. Your closet can be organized and structured, but others don't need to know. They only see what you show them out in the world. Now we know the pieces and how do they interact. A UX designer needs to consider how their user will navigate through a website. Take a look at this graph. It shows that mobile website traffic surpassed desktop traffic on websites in the beginning of 2014. The proliferation of smartphones, tablets, technology, and media queries, i.e. responsive website frameworks, has increased this access, but is also a function of human trends and meeting users where they are heading. Mobile is trending. You will hear mobile first as a strategy for design, thinking, and providing solutions for users through the web. Luckily, we can build for mobile and desktop simultaneously through the use of responsive web design frameworks. A framework is a standardized set of components, practices, and criteria for dealing with a common type of problem, i.e. a website. In web design, a framework becomes a package of standardized code, HTML, CSS, JS, documents, etc., which can be used to support the development of a website. Think of a framework as the building blocks for what will be put together to make a website. As most websites share similar structure and components, A framework codebase allows for us to develop faster rather than designing and developing from scratch. Here's an example of a very popular UI framework, Twitter Bootstrap. As you can see, it provides a starting place for all the components that become a site when assembled. Twitter Bootstrap uses media queries and is built on a responsive grid. The rise of mobile trends has resulted in the rise of responsive design techniques. A responsive structure creates a set of columns that reorder and cascade content as the screen dimensions change from device to device. Twitter Bootstrap, for example, is built on a 12-column grid, 940 pixel width. You can go to bootstrapuikit.com and download the user interface source files for Illustrator and Sketch. We will be using both Bootstrap CSS code as well as the design layout UI components to build and assemble our website layouts in future sections for this course. As we are starting to understand and use the fundamentals of UX, as well as build the foundation for using UX design and development, we quickly got up to speed with what UX is, so let's review. UX is at the center of business, technology, and design. UX combines a lot of educational components, from psychology to human-computer science, interaction, and design. UX has a large number of skills, from personas to wireframes to prototypes. We learned about where UX came from and who does it, and we reviewed some resources to find out more about the UX conversation. We are following a web design process that allows us to consider our users through user profiles and personas, then understand our website structure and organization through a sitemap, all to help us start designing with our technology requirements in consideration for our solutions and the use of open source frameworks like Twitter Bootstrap. Now that we have defined some fundamentals of the site, we can move on to create our site and the next steps of the process, which are inventing, ideating, and building. Up next is section 2 of this course, Applying Human-Centered Design. See you there. Hello, and welcome back to section 2 of User Experience for Web Developers. And in this section, we'll be growing our UX understanding by learning about how to apply human-centered user experience skills to our web fundamentals that we learned and talked about in the first section. In this section, we'll be taking a look at how to build user experience and empathy maps, improving our observation skills, learning and defining some problem definition, building and creating some screen flows, and then creating a way for us to do some intervention planning. So let's get going. If you remember, a fundamental user experience attribute starts with us trying to understand and relate to our users. For us, to gain knowledge about our users, is that we need to start by observing what they do and what they are interested in. As a user experience designer, I constantly watch how, where, when, and why people use technology or engage in experiences. People watching is a skill that allows you as a UX designer to practice your own empathy for a user. When observing users, I attempt not to interfere with their experience and just be a fly on the wall. If you start watching people, you'll find time and time again that they do strange and curious things when interacting with apps, websites, or products. Your observations will show you that you're not the only user. This is a very important point. You are not the user. You may use the technology or even the service, explore the websites, or be involved in the solutions. However, if all you ever do is solve a problem for yourself, your solutions will be inherently flawed because they will skew towards a self-centered rationale rather than a human-centered, and your solutions will be myopic. Just as I am not a 21-year-old female from New York City, and hopefully you can tell that from my voice that it is true. However, if I observe, I get to know, and I build empathy for that 21-year-old female, I can start to remove my personal bias and invent for her intentions in mind, which in turn will keep our solutions more centered around what her needs are and how to concern ourselves with that user type. Placing the user at the center can be the hardest conceptual shift that any user experience designer needs and requires. And it is something we should be working at all of the time. User experience designers need to build their empathy skills. We can accomplish this by practicing solving problems for others rather than ourselves. So let's improve our empathy. Hello, and welcome back to Section 2. Now that we have an idea of how relating to our users helps, let's go ahead and learn some human-centered design skills. We're going to learn about empathy, what it is and how we use it. We're going to build some empathy maps. We'll then review some observation skills and extract some insights from an exercise of do, say, think, and feel. So here we go. To accomplish the important task of keeping our users at the forefront of our thinking and our web design solutions, we can employ a few empathy building tools and skills. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It is a unique human-centered skill that allows us to think and relate to how other users experience the world. In a previous section, we discussed user profiles and personas as a tactic for keeping our users in mind when designing. To build on that understanding, a very useful task is to participate in user interviews. Having touch points with actual users will allow you to gain better understanding and reveal more unique insights when gathering information about the effectiveness of your solutions. Observing, like a fly on the wall, is a passive process that allows you to see how your users interact, while interviews become an active process, and the interaction with users facilitates a conversation and reveals more about your observations. They go hand in hand. You observe, and then you can interview. When talking with users, it's important to frame conversations so that you're learning about their experience and building empathy for your users. The interview exercise of do, say, think, and feel is a great interview and observation tool for rounding out your understanding of a user's experience. You could start with a question like, tell me what you think of the current website. This is an open-ended question that allows your interviewer to be able to observe and answer the do, say, think, and feel of their experience. If your user doesn't answer any of the perspectives that you would want them to ask, you can follow up with questions that allow you to flesh out these individual components. By trying to obtain a perspective of how our user is doing, saying, thinking, and feeling, a user experience designer can build a more complete picture of a particular system. Many people will say one thing, while they will do another thing completely, think a third thing, and feel a fourth thing based on the difference between what they think they know, what they actually do, and what they say they do. Watching a user plus talking to them plus trying to understand their intentions, all the while relating to their experience, equals a more contextual and complete empathy map. We can try this on ourselves. Testing tasks on yourself first can be a useful way to make sure you're familiar with the process before using it on others to produce insights. When building a thinking pattern for others, like do, say, think, and feel, you must first want to own your own solutions. I like to cook, and I always taste my sauce before I serve it to others. Empathy is rooted in shared experience. Therefore, you should use and test your own solutions and ask yourself the same questions before you ask another user. Get out a piece of paper and a pencil. We're going to build an empathy map for ourselves. Draw on the piece of paper a cross. In the upper left square of the cross, label it say. In the lower left, label it do. In the upper right, label it think. And the lower right, label it feel. So it goes do, say, think, and feel. On the lower half, place a statement that says problem, and then you also want to give yourself a portion where you can leave insights. Good. Once you've done this, let's go test this process. Go to www.tomford.com and attempt to navigate to men's small leather goods. Go do that now. Once you have finished exploring tomford.com, from men's to small leather goods, go and fill out your empathy map, starting with the do, then going to the say, the think, and then the feel. The do, you were navigating to small leather goods. What did you say about the process? If you could talk it out loud. What did you think you were doing or what you were trying to do, and how did it make you feel? Take a look at your responses and see if they all connect. We will be using these to draw some insights next. Keep in mind which tasks you could or couldn't do and how you liked or didn't like the aesthetics of the site experience. Take a look at your completed map. Did you learn anything about your experience? An important point about user experiences is that it needs to consider the do, say, think, and feel, because all experience we are attempting to solve use these factors to evaluate our experience in the end. Let's define some insights from our experience with tomford.com. An insight is an understanding of a specific cause and effect in a specific context. Look at your empathy map and see if any unique items jump out. If your feelings and your actions are not in line, that could be a problem area with the website. If your thinking was made confused, or you said, "Ooh, I don't like that," or, "Well, what part of the experience didn't you like?" Personal insights, like the one we are uncovering by going through this empathy map for ourselves, can be used during interviews with others. And the learnings that we've gained from our own do, say, think, and feel can be balanced against and matched up to the experiences that others have and help us relate patterns in experience. When multiple users have similar outcomes or issues, that could lead to insights and issues that are justified and balanced from our personal bias. We are starting to build out our observation skills and improve our empathy for our users. Empathy is important for a user experience designer. And we need to improve our empathy through living in the experiences ourselves, but also using empathy to learn about others and use these interview tools to dig deeper and reveal insights, future potential changes. Empathy gathering is a constant task, but it has the greatest impact towards the beginning of solving problems, as it helps us identify and reveal patterns for where issues occur. Plus, it's something that we have to work on all of the time. In the next video, we're going to get into observation and problem mapping. Welcome back. I hope you're getting acquainted with how user experience keeps our users in mind and helps in applying human-centered design strategies like empathy maps to understand our users' issues and needs. In this video, we're going to take steps to improve our observation skills through observing a user interact with a website, defining interaction moments and recording issues, curious moments or oddities in their process, and building out user flows to capture the experience we observed. So let's get moving on these web design fundamentals. Take out a piece of paper or something to take notes on, as we're going to observe a user interact with a website. Using notes to observe our user, we're going to think about what actions they're taking, and we're going to take notes on where they go, if they get stuck, and what they interact with, etc. Before we start the observation, keep a few things in mind. We want to record notes about all the major actions taken by our user. If they click on a tab, where does it take them? If they roll over a navigation, what happens? If they go forward or backwards from screen to screen, why do they do it? The goal is to help us observe potential pitfalls in the website and what is working and not working based on our observation. We'll be watching for where the mouse travels. Watch for areas of pause in the mouse or retracing of steps. Look for repeats and quick decisions. We will be watching a user's mouse only in the interactions with a website. So we are trying to address and uncover issues or problems with any interactions. Are you ready? Great. Let's start watching. The observation will be about 2 minutes and 30 seconds of a website interaction. This is a pre-recorded set of interactions, and many user testing process should be some sort of capturing of a user and interactions. If you need to rewind and watch over, please do, but take notes as you watch the user interact with the website. Did you pay attention? Interesting, right? So let's review our observation list. Does it capture all the steps our user engaged in? Does it record all the major interactions and stuff that the user engaged in? If not, you can go back and watch again. The goal is to get all of the actions the user took during our observations. And we're going to take a deeper dive into what they mean and how to map them out. Now that you've finished observing, write down what you think the user should have accomplished during their time on the website. Was there anything you observed that felt problematic or confusing? Take a look at your observation list. Was there any point during the interaction that you thought the user should have completed but didn't? During our observation, our user attempted to purchase a notebook and got nearly through the process before quitting and exiting the site. The exit of our user from the purchase process demonstrates a problematic failure that we identified through our observations. We also identified that the user wants to view the content at different sizes on the monitor and drags the corner down to the mobile size. This may have been the user testing to see if the website would work on their mobile device. Unfortunately, the site was not built on a responsive framework, so the content did not resize or reposition as the screen becomes smaller. We also observed some interesting things in our notes, but let's take a step deeper and capture an interaction flow for how and where we observed our user and where they go off the rails. You may go back to the observation and watch again, but let's start by retracing the steps of the website we observed. So go to www.theghostyStore.com. Take a look at our observation list. During this process, we're going to be screen capturing every point along the path of what we observed of our users. The user starts at the home page, so screenshot that. Then they go to the carousel change, then the drop down, navigation. Each section, make sure to screen capture each of those. The clothing section, screen capture that. The clothing, smaller screen. The action method, the action pad, the enlarge image action pad, the add to cart modal, the add to the cart experience, and then the checkout. You should screen capture all of these sections of the website. Did you get all those? Great. Now we have images and a still frame capture of the path our user took throughout the site that we observed. Next, we're going to lay out these screen captures into a screen flow to capture an overview of our user's experience. Once you have captured all these screens, you might be asking yourself, why are we doing this? We are growing our empathy for our user, just like our empathy maps. Observing a user interact helps us hone in on building them a better experience. When trying to understand a user through observing them, you need to give yourself visuals for how their experience was while using a website. The screen grabs you have taken are going to be assembled into a screen flow that will help you map when and where your user becomes lost or loses interest. Open up Adobe Illustrator or any other similar program that can lay out some photos and organize content. Create a new document. Select the web at 1024 by 768, though we will be modifying the document size at will. The document size is irrelevant as the goal is to build a way to see the experience as a sequence. Since we're going to be using this multiple times, select the layer panel and add 3 layers. The labels should be 1, screen grabs, 2, the labels, and 3, annotations. That's what we refer to as notes. Select the artboard tool and make your artboard 10,024 pixels by 7,680 pixels to enlarge the size but keeping the aspect ratio the same for printing and sharing. Next, let's place our screenshots on the document. Make sure the screenshot layer is selected and place all your screens that you captured from before. Next, we're going to organize these screenshots into a couple rows. Once the Align tool is open through the option dropdown, you can select the screens and move them into the upper left corner of the artboard. Take the last screenshot in the selection and drag it to the upper right. Now you can use the Align tool to distribute a selection of those artboards and screenshots that we just placed in our document. Now let's align them to the top and distribute them so they're evenly spaced. You can repeat these steps for all of the screenshots that you've captured to make sure that you have a nice, even grid that maps out your user's experience and is in the order that we captured the process. Great. Your screenshots should look something like this. Next, we're going to go and include some screen labels to give us an overview of what we observed and how we can then explain the experience. Select the labels layer and then select the type tool. Click and drag a type tool box above the screenshot in the upper left corner of the artboard. Using the type tool, select the type box and add the label of homepage landing page. Using the selection tool, hold down the Option and Shift button and you can copy and drag the type box across the top. Do this and label each screenshot for all of the pages that we captured in the experience through our screenshots. These should be titles for all the pages. Good. Now select all the type boxes and drag and Option Shift drag down to include them for above every screenshot that's on the page. You should have the same label for every screenshot, so go through and modify each label to match the screenshot below, like this. Great. Now we're starting to get all of the screens on there and labeled. Now, let's go capture some moments that we experienced and observed. select the annotations layer. Selecting the pen tool, let's capture some instances in our screen flow where a user made selections that took them from page to page. Click over to the navigating button, and drag to the next screen. So using the pen tool, you can kind of draw lines between where the user interacted with the screen and where it took them. Using a stroke, let's modify it and make sure that you can see it, and let's change the color to magenta so it's very clear on the artboard. Next, we can take that line that we've just created and change the terminuses of the line to having a circle of where you touch and an arrow for where it ends. Do the same for all the places on the screen where the user made a selection. They touched a button or they hit a navigation piece, all the places that are there. We're starting to map out and give this document an overview of the web journey and the experience that we observed previously. Now we're going to identify some of the problem areas and issues observed during the preview of our user experience. Again, select back into the annotations layer. Using the type tool, add some areas where the user did something confusing based on your observations. So that could be when they make the monitor smaller to check the responsiveness. That could have been not leaving the experience at the end. That could have been going back and forth between pages. Any place you thought there was something weird in the experience, add some type and describe what that experience was, and then change that type color to red to indicate that it becomes an issue in the experience. Now we're starting to get our experience mapped out. You should review your screen flow, and it should have labels for each screen, arrows for interactions and flow between those screens that we observed, and annotations that call out any of the problems that we observed during our observation. The screen flow allows us to have a bird's eye view of the experience of our users. We are beginning to understand where and potentially why our user made mistakes and where they had issues during their experience of using the ghostlystore.com. By observing and mapping out their experience through a screen flow, we are walking through the experiences ourselves. And it builds out our empathy for our user that allows us to overview their experience and then create and communicate where and when they experienced issues. Up next, we're going to discuss intervention planning. See you there. Welcome back to Section 2. I hope you're starting to familiarize yourself with the importance of observation when it comes to user experience. For any great user experience to exist, it must first start with knowing who your user is, then identifying any issues, and then planning a solution for those issues. Eventually, we'll even get to testing. Sounds easy, right? Well, with practice, it will get easier. We are beginning to understand and identify problems with our user experience through a screen flow of our website observations. In this video, we're going to build on our intervention planning skills. We will make sure we know what the issues and problems are. We will build a new screen flow that potentially fixes some of the issues we observed. And then we'll finish by reviewing the plan and the next section, which is what we'll be wireframing. So let's get moving on these web design fundamentals. Take a look at our observed screen flow from the website theghostly.com. We identified a few problem areas while observing our user. The user can't see the content on tablet or mobile screens. We can assume that the site is not built on a responsive framework that allows this content and that we discussed in Section 1. And the second thing is we observed our user gets stuck while navigating content. We can assume this is either confusing or unclear. The third thing we observed is that the user never completes the checkout due to the confusing and tedious forms. Based on these issues, let's build a screen flow that attempts to fix these issues. Let's open back up our screen flow from the document that we created in the last section. In your screen flow document, let's create a new artboard. I'm using Illustrator to build these deliverables, but the method or purpose is similar for other design tools and other layout programs, including OmniGraffle, PowerPoint, Keynote, Sketch 3, or any other program. If you are using a different program, ignore Illustrator jargon and make your screen flows follow the same intention. Select the Artboard tool in your toolbar. At the top section, select the new artboard. Done. Awesome. Now let's work through the screen flow that we need to fix our issues. Let's create some layers in the artboard that we'll apply to the screen flow. Add a new layer, label it New Screen Flow. While in that layer, let's build out our steps for our new screen flow. Using the box shape tool, let's add a box for our desktop, which is at 1680 by 1050 pixels. Push once, and the dimension dialog box will appear where you can add your size and relationship. Now let's copy this 8 times and align them. To fix the different screen sizes and make our new screen responsive, let's also include the other sizes. Do the same for 1024 by 768, which is the tablet, and for the phone, which is 420 by 320. Your screen flow should look something like this. Now let's label the new screen flow. Same as before. Let's select the label layer, and using the type tool, let's add some labels for each of the screens. They will be similar to that of what we observed in our other screen flow. Good. Now we have a basic framework for the number of screens we will design for the new section of our plan. To help our users define each screen further, let's add some context about what the user needs to do in each section, as we will be building the content for the user to see. Using the type tool again, let's add a type box below each screen section. Under the first one, label it landing page. Our user will need to be introduced to products and navigation for finding what they're looking for. User will see attractive and clear product offering. Number 2, navigation. When a user selects navigation, they are given more contextual information before making the decision to go on to that section. 3, the product detail. When a user selects to narrow their product view, they should be presented with a new layout that shows them a focused view and more contextual information for their search for a product. Users should be delighted to review and move through multiple products at once. Product detail highlight. Upon selecting, the user should be given a focused view of the product with clear action as to what they can do with their found object. Users should be able to see multiple images of the product and highlight unique selling components for the product. Next would be a shopping cart. When a user wants the product, they should have confidence they have added it to their stored and shared content or their shopping cart. Can the user see how many items and the callback to their desired selection? The next thing would be the shopping cart. User is now in transaction mode and should feel like a quick and easy set of steps with an outcome of what and when they will receive their product. A purchase, details, or shipping. You guys have probably bought a number of things, but we'll choose a checkout and should be helped along by adding their purchase details. Possibly include PayPal or other quick interaction for payment. And then finally, a complete purchase screen. Users should be supported and make them feel good about the product that they just purchased, its cost, its shipping time, and its potential upcoming deals. Add any other emotions or feelings you think the user should feel at each screen, pulling from our previous observations and the lessons of do, say, think, and feel. These empathy markers will help us as we move through the design and the wireframing process and planning. To help the user define each screen further, let's add some context about what the user will need to do in each section, as well as context what the user will see. Using the type tool again, let's add a type below each screen section title. Under landing page, add unique, happy, free. Actually, they could be any adjectives. These are the ones that I'm just choosing. Under the navigation, it should say clear. Under the product detail, it should say happy and bright. Under the product detail highlight, fun and fancy. Under add a shopping cart, it should say unique and clear. Shopping cart, clear and unambiguous. Add purchase details shipping, should say confident. And complete purchase screen should be supported and fun or elated. If you want to change any of those adjectives or the way that people should feel, go right ahead. These are the ones that I have chosen. But let's change the color of these and the title to green for what we should be trying to achieve. This new screen flow might feel a little bit blank at the moment. However, we will be starting to fill it in with our designs and with what we will be building in the next section. However, this new screen flow is starting to help us do some essential intervention planning and interaction planning. It becomes an outline for our screens. It starts to help us define some high-level content. Plus, it allows us to think about what our user is feeling throughout the experience, which will help us keep our users out in front, which is why UX matters. We can review and revise these screens along the process, but it starts to become a path forward and builds on our prior learnings from the empathy maps and observations. Now we can begin with the fun stuff, which is the tactical design and wireframing of each section. We are starting to gain an understanding of how to use the fundamentals of UX as a way to start thinking through a user experience. Through observation, we can experience our user's process and potential pitfalls and problems. Through mapping their experience in a screen flow, we, as UX designers, can have an eagle-eye view into their system and their potential problems. This is a top-level view that allows us to identify and then plan for alternative ways around the issues that we observed. And it helps us build consensus around where and how we can move forward. The UX skill of empathy and observation will infuse our planning and considerations as we move forward into the website process. Now that we have defined our new plan, let's go and start ideating, wireframing, and building our new web experience. Up next in section 3 of this course, enhancing site navigation and laying out a website. See you there. Hello and welcome back to section 3 of the UX course for developers. I'm your guide, Chris Becker, and in this section, we will be growing our UX understanding by learning about information architecture. In the last section, we improved our human-centered design skills, including building empathy maps, improving our observation skills, learning some things about problem definition, building and creating some screen flows, and creating some intervention planning. In this section, we will improve our UX skills and enhance our web design processes. In this video, we will enhance some site structure, build a sitemap, review some page templates, learn some things about SERPs, review content and UI patterns, define some page clustering, relate information architecture's role, create some sitemaps, review our system, devise what to simplify and to unclutter that will lead to clarity. So let's work on how we understand and relate structure, organization to the site. When we refer to organization and structure of a website, these skills are associated with the information architecture aspect of the UX spectrum. Information architecture is the art and science of organizing and structuring websites. It could also be used in software to support usability and findability, and it typically involves a model or concept of information, which is used and applied to activities that require explicit details of complex information systems. So let's learn about how to improve our site structure and sitemap. Placing the user at the center can be the hardest conceptual shift that UX requires, but also recognizing that your user also needs clarity and organization can lead to building and eliminating a cluttered and unnecessary content experience. UX embodies information architecture, and we need to balance the need for clarity and structure with our users' needs. Like a user knows the difference between a novel and a comic book, a sitemap allows us to understand and relate volume of content and structure. So let's get going. In this video, we're going to learn some human-centered design skills. We're going to relate information architecture's role. We're going to create a sitemap. We'll review our system, and then we'll devise a way to simplify and unclutter. So here we go. To accomplish the important task of organizing and maintaining structure, let's recreate a sitemap for the current site we've observed in section 2.0. A sitemap is a list of pages of a website accessible to crawlers and users. It can be either a document in any form used as a planning tool for web design and gives a list of web pages on the website, typically organized in a hierarchical fashion. In the previous session, we observed the ghostrystore.com and devised possible new ways for our user to move through the site. To help us understand the structure of the site, it is sound advice for us to rebuild the sitemap. Go to the site and write down all the tabs on the site in the navigation. Write down any time the content has a unique look to the page. Give it a title and a label. If content layout is the same in different sections, make a note, and we can discuss how you're seeing and recording a website's template. Did you get this done? Good. Now you'll be asking, why are we doing this? When trying to understand a website, we need to review the underlying structure and organization. Open up Illustrator or like program. Create a new document that's sized for a website of 1024 by 768, though we'll be modifying the document size later. Select the Layers panel and add 3 layers. Label them Layer 1, Pages, Layer 2, the Lines, and Layer 3, the Templates. Starting in the upper left, let's create a box. Fill that box with white. Using the Type tool, label the box with 0.0 landing page. Repeat this step for each unique page on the website. Change the number and the title for every new page that exists on the site. Your first layer should look like this. Next, let's connect these pages with some lines to show hierarchy. placing the landing page above the other pages in the upper left corner. Select the line layer. Using the pen tool, let's draw a line to connect these pages. Think of these connection lines as a path. If a user follows the same path to get to the different sections, it can only have one line, like this. Great! Now we can start visualizing how many levels deep the site is. Next, let's add a line. Let's add a layer with some content and context. When you go to the site, there are 3 layers deep to access content. 1, the list view. 2, the detail of the content. Add 2 more boxes and label them 1.1 content view and 1.2 content detail. Repeat this for all your content pages. It should look like this. Great. Now let's start defining some similarities. Did you notice that all your content detail pages are the same layout? Yes? Me too. So let's add some clarity to our sitemap that starts to define some page templating. A page template is when a website uses a similar layout and UI interaction for multiple content sections of a website. A pro to templating is that it gives a way to minimize the customization of a website and also to maintain consistency of interaction for your users. A con to page templating is that if overused, a website can feel monotonous and too similar in all of its content and the experience of the interaction. A word of thumb for templating is to use it where you are attempting to do the same thing, i.e. content details. User has the same goals when viewing a product in detail, therefore you can apply one interaction template for the experience to maintain consistency and similarity in interaction. We are starting to build our information architecture skills and how to improve our site structure for our users. So let's review. Structure is important for scale, and the sitemaps that we just built help us see and map all the pages. In the next video, we'll get into building some more structure for our website. Welcome back. I hope your sitemaps are starting to become more clear and more organized. We are starting to understand and identify how clarity and structure helps when designing and understanding the system of a website. In this video, we're going to build out our content strategy skills. We'll review our templating, define content per section, review what is necessary on the page, and refine some of our elements. So let's get moving on these web design fundamentals. Open your newly created and modified sitemaps. Create a new layer called Content Types. Create a table on the right of your sitemap, like this, using the box tool to draw and create structure. Using the Type tool, add a label, 0.0 landing page. Include a few bullet points using the Type tool that we will use to fill in eventually. Good. Now do this for each section of your sitemap. Now let's fill out some content and context to help us define and relate what we will need on each page of our design. In the landing page, we have a large highlight image. We also have a branding image. We have copy for content, grid view for mixed content. We have a content title. We have content short description. And then we also have the cost of the content. Great. Let's do this for each section. For the GIFs, we have a grid view for the content. We have a content title, we have a content short description, and we have a content cost. Repeat for similar content sections. For art, for design, for clothing. In 4.0, the art specials, we have a highlight image area, if you remember. We have a copy section for why they highlighted it. There's a content grid, a content title, some content short description, and a content cost. Great. Now we are starting to relate and understand what kind of content needs our site redesign will require. Is there anything that you think they're missing? Any content that feels unnecessary? Go through and highlight any questionable content types in red. If you remember, your user has a drop-down in the navigation. I think each section is missing a filter drop-down. If you think this is missing, add it in green to indicate it's a new addition, like this. Great. Now we're starting to think about how our user is going to get around the site and what content they will need to encounter. Let's go through and make sure our site has all the right content. Write down the list of each drop-down in the section of each, like this. Great. Now we know how much content our users has access to. Through doing this, we are starting to gain an understanding of the content that our new site must contain throughout our user experience. Through rebuilding and documenting our content types and amounts, we start to maintain and understand the types of content and the scale, as well as how our users should see and experience this content. In the next video, talking about and revealing some design patterns, and talking about not reinventing the wheel. Welcome back. I hope your sitemaps are starting to become more clear and have more organization, and are starting to outline and relate content requirements. We are starting to understand and identify how clarity and structure helps when designing and understanding the system of a website. In this video, we're going to build on our content strategy skills by understanding UI patterns, defining content per section, and defining some interaction patterns for our website. So let's get moving on these web design fundamentals. Open up your newly created and modified sitemaps with your content definition document. We are going to start identifying some UI patterns for the ghostlystore.com and locate where we can incorporate similar contextual information that will help in the redesign of our site. You might be asking, what is a UI pattern? And why do we use them? A user interface design pattern is a recurring solution that has been solved in common design problems. Design patterns are standard reference points for the experienced user interface designer. User interface patterns include things like getting input, for example, an email form, or navigation. The user needs to locate specific features and content needs to navigate and accomplish moving around the site. That could also be things like dealing with data. Data can be searched, formatted, overviewed, browsed, a variety of ways. But think about things like filters or Google search. There's also relationships to social. Social allows users to associate, communicate, and interact with other people online. And this can be things like the like button or to tweet, aspects like that. Let's look at some examples to get familiarized with what UI patterns are. Go to ui-patterns.com. There are many other than this, but this is a great resource. Common UI patterns allow for our users to have an already familiar interaction, which keeps them from having to learn something new when they come to your website. Take a look at this one, the drop-down. You've seen it many times before. We could also take a look at things like the gallery. Explore some of the patterns that are in here to familiarize yourself with what it is and what it is not. Let's go back and open up the sitemap and content annotations document. Now that we have started to understand and rate some common UI patterns, let's identify a few UI patterns we should be using for our redesign of the Ghostly store. One, we decided to choose a drop-down filter and can be used for the content sections. So a drop-down would be useful there. All content details go into a gallery pattern for context and images. And our navigation, we could use a tabbed UI pattern to indicate that it's navigation. There are many, many more, and identify as many as you think exist. As we start defining our user interface structure for our website, we can start identifying content types and aspects of interaction that will help us create a consistent and well-understood experience. Understanding and using UI patterns will help improve your website's usability and overall experience, and will also speed up your development process because you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you can start by using off-the-shelf code bases for interaction components for your site. In the next video, we'll discuss the SERPs of a homepage and location-free browsing. Welcome back. I hope your user experience and web design knowledge is starting to grow. So let's water it with some more new fun stuff. We are starting to understand how structure and planning can both identify content for a site, but also speed up the development and usability through user interface patterns. In this video, we're going to build on how to make our websites the best that they can be, through understanding SERPs, why we use it, define some location-free browsing, and how to include these aspects into our web designs. So let's get moving on these web design fundamentals. Websites are destinations for the internet. Websites are a lot of things, and the internet has allowed them all to connect. However, as a user, you still need to be able to find the websites you want. We do this through search engines, the most popular being Google. Google's search engine allows us to find the website's address that allows us to go to the site. Google can return results in a search through what is known as SERP, or Search Engine Result Page. It is a listing of results returned by a search engine in response to keyword queries. The result normally includes a list of items with titles, a reference to the full page, and a short description, showing where the keywords have matched to the content on the page. A SERP may refer to a single page of link returns, or to the set of links listed for a search query. Search engine primarily uses content contained within the web page and fall back on the metadata tags of a web page to generate the content that makes up the search snippet. The HTML tag title will be used as the title of the snippet, while most relevant or useful content of a web page, description tags, and page copy will be used for the description. The quality of your web page SERP can be the difference in your web page showing up in the first page of Google rather than the 13th. And lately, Google has started prioritizing mobile-friendly sites over just desktop when returning results. Let's take a look at some examples. There are some best practices and search optimization tricks, or SEO, you can use while developing your websites that will help your SERP output and improve the ability of your users to find your site once it is redesigned or made live on the internet. There are many tricks of the trade for SEO, but if you maintain and follow a few tricks, it can help your website's success by being found and indexed correctly by a search engine. Go to searchengeneland.com/2simple tips each to set each local SEO. When surfing the web, there are a few aspects that should be understood. 1, you are connected to the internet through an IP address. The IP address can also localize you, your area, your age, your sex, your past searches, your social feed. This data is important as it helps companies like Google target you with better content in your search. Go to explore some of this conversation at PCWorld.com article, How and Why to Surf the Web in Secret. Now, your website design should not discriminate, as you want as many eyeballs to see it as you can. Therefore, you should apply location-free browsing measures to your content and foundation of code that allow your website to be seen by all and not be blocked by any users who are using a hidden IP address or a masked VPN number that was discussed in the article above. As we start building out our website experience, it is important to recognize how the internet works and how users both find and search and surf the web. Your website conceptually should be for as many people as it can, and we become familiar with sound SERP procedures which allow us to ensure that users can surf the web using location-free browsing and tour the site will not be missed by them, and that your website will be accessible by technology as it can to help users find it. Up next, we'll discuss some ideas of landing pages, templating, and page clustering. Welcome back. I hope you're gaining a better understanding of the systems of how the internet works and how we can build our websites to play as nicely as they can for maximum visibility. We are starting to understand how structure, planning, and content can speed up our website design process, but also build great experiences. In this video, we're going to build on how to make our websites the best they can be by understanding the importance of a landing page, discuss templates, how not to use a template, and why to use page clustering. So let's get moving on these web design fundamentals. Websites are a destination for the internet. And when a user chooses to go to a website, they land on the home page of a site a majority of the time. If a user goes to a primary URL, let's say the address of italic-studio.com, it takes the user to the landing page of the experience. This design studio is a particularly interesting concept, as when you scroll down the page, the animations change the shapes and the experience, incentivizing the scroll and using some cool technology like parallax scrolling and JS animations. A landing page in online marketing is a single web page that appears in a response to clicking on an online advertisement. The landing page will usually display direct sales copy that is a logical extension of the advertisement that a user has searched. A landing page is not necessarily a home page to a website, like we just looked at. Let's look at a couple examples. Landing pages allow your users to get an extension of the same experience. Landing pages can put your users into a purchase funnel or conversation and social media cycle. Landing pages can support marketing initiatives like sales, new products, or overstock management. And landing pages should never be dead ends, and your users should always be able to get back to the homepage of your site. Let's open back up our sitemaps and add a content section that includes a landing page for our website. Using the box tool, let's add another page above the navigation, as a landing pages are independent from our primary website navigation. As there will be potentially multiple landing pages, copy and stack a few boxes on top of themselves. Using the type tool, let's add a label as a landing page. Using the pen tool, let's draw a line down to the content details and makes the line in a light blue to show that these pages' connections are unique. I have allowed my landing pages to deep link inside the details of content, allowing our web page to use landing pages as a way to move sales and overstock items and give our users a deep link function into our site. Great. Now we can see our site structure is allowing us to maintain all our systems of our services and marketing objectives. Now let's identify a few places where we can template our pages. Page templating is identifying locations in our structure that are similar and thus can be templated and designed once for all rather than customizing every page. Page templating allows us to speed up our designs and use open source code and UI patterns to the best of our ability. Let's go to our sitemap and content sections and include a landing page section, which we already have. All the content sections can be templated. Let's use color to identify these pages as template 1, light gray. Template 2, let's choose a different gray, a medium gray. And this is for our content detail. A third template, dark gray, we could identify for our landing pages. Templating should be 1, unique to the content, and 2, consider your website experience in your brand. You should not have one template for every page. Using the same template for different experiences, for example, the About page and the content grid, would be redundant and ruin the experience. The World Wide Web has become the largest source of information. This abundance of information makes information retrieval a difficult process for the average user. A clustering process organizes and collects the objects into related groups. Web page clustering is the key concept for getting desired information quickly from the massive storage of web pages on the internet. Your web page templating should deploy some page clustering techniques. If you're interested in more of this, download this paper at www.academia.edu. We are starting to gain an understanding of how the UX fundamentals and web design use both structure in information architecture, the systems of the web, both search engines, SERPs, landing pages, and page clustering, and allow users to get efficiently into a website experience. We're starting to apply these lessons in the next section of our course, which starts to get at what our site will look like. Up next, in section 4 of this course, wireframing 1.0, using responsive web design. Hello, and welcome to section 4 of this course. And in this section, we will be growing our user experience understanding by learning about how to lay out a web page. In the previous section, we explored the advantages of user information architecture skills for laying out and structuring our website. In the last section, we built our web structure and learned about some user interface aspects of web design. We will take a look at improving our user experience and user interface skills and wireframing. Let's jump right into this section with the first video. In this video, we will review responsive web design, use and build grids for thinking about multiple screens, learn to wireframe mobile first, build some responsive web design wireframes, review Twitter Bootstrap wireframe rules and responsive rules, and review our layouts and grids. So let's get going. User experience is rooted in building great experiences for our users. A major aspect of understanding this process, in the previous sections, we have defined the structure and content, and now we're going to build and lay out our new web page. This includes clarity, understanding, and structure to our layouts, but also considering our users. We are moving into the design phase of our website. These skills are associated with the interaction design aspects of user experience, where a designer builds the interactions to accomplish tasks. And we will be wireframing out these experiences. Wireframing is a sketch. It acts as a guide representing the skeletal framework, structure, and content outlined in a website. Some values of wireframing is that it establishes elements, shows page layout, arranges content, starts to define some interactive elements, and explores navigational systems. Wireframes are meant to be a step before visual design and development that helps speed up the process. Therefore, it usually excludes the constraints of typography, color, or graphical design elements and concentrates on the structure and content of the site. Wireframing is an essential sketching skill that allows user experience design to explore and define possibilities quickly and cheaply. There could be many stages of wireframing in its fidelity. From low fidelity, whiteboard, pencil sketches, on paper, to high fidelity, which are fully articulated and annotated components. Sketching interfaces and relying on wireframing as a quick tool for exploring and defining your website options, in turn will create better and more useful and faster web designs. Next, we will create and learn how to build and structure our wireframes. Welcome back. I hope you're starting to get acquainted with how user experience uses structure and organization to understand a website system, especially when thinking about responsive web design. In this video, we're going to take steps in organizing and creating our website. We're going to build our knowledge about responsive web design. We're going to create some grids through using Twitter Bootstrap rules, and we're going to review our layouts. So let's get moving on these user experience skills. Open up the sitemap that we have rebuilt for the ghostly2store.com. It should look like this. Having this open will help us think about content, navigation, and other UI-related layout components. In Illustrator, let's create a new document. Save this as gs_wf_version1. We are going to set up our screens, define our grid, and build some wireframe assets, layout, and structure our wireframes. Next, let's create our screens. Using the artboard tool, create a screen that is 1440 pixels by 900 pixels. Next, let's create a new artboard screen that is 768 pixels by 1024 pixels for your tablet. Repeat this process for your mobile. Create a new artboard that is 320 pixels by 640. This is the iPhone 6 dimensions. Move your created artboards on your canvas in the order we are going to design them. Go into the artboard's title and label each screen. O1 HP Mobile. HP stands for homepage. O2 underscore HP tablet, 03 HP desktop. Starting with the hardest screen to the easiest, this will look like phone, then tablet, then desktop. Great. Now we're going to see our screens for designing. Let's include our grids to help with our layout. In the Layers palette, create 4 layers. 1, the grid, 2, the background, 3, wireframes, and 4, annotations. Next, let's build a grid for Bootstrap. The column is 62 pixels wide, like this. Select the grid layer and then create a rectangle box. Create a box that is 62 pixels wide and 640 pixels tall. This box, place it in the rows. Good. Now let's give the row a 15 pixel edge. Turn your document rulers on and drag out a guide at 15 pixels. Drag the top of the box to the right and distribute evenly using the Align tool. Great. Now let's do the same for the tablet using the 81 pixel grid column. This should have 12 columns. And for the desktop, let's use the 97 pixel at 900 pixel columns width, which shows 12 columns. Great. Now we have a set of columns that allow us to think about how the content is going to get laid out. Let's make sure these grids make sense. Let's color the grids the way in a pink and give them an occupancy of 50% so we know that they are grids. We're starting to gain on our wireframes and build out some structure and content for our homepage. All of the steps are essential for a UX designer as they help us get inside and define the experience and structure. Up next, building your wireframes setup. Welcome back. I hope your responsive web designs are starting to come more clear and have more grid organization based on Twitter Bootstrap. In this video, we're going to build on our wireframing skills. We're going to build out and get some wireframe components. We're going to start wireframing out from mobile through desktop of our homepage. And we're going to review and build out wireframes for our layouts. So let's get moving on these web design fundamentals. Open up your wireframes file. While working with grids, we created a layer 3 wireframes. Select that layer, and now let's start building some wireframe elements. A box with an X demarcates an image or a video file. A box represents a bar or a container. A text box can be filled with lorem ipsum to be placeholder for copy. Navigation can be tabbed and can be used as a hamburger for mobile devices. Keep in mind the UI patterns we reviewed during our content review of the Ghostly website. To speed up our process, go to http://theycallmecrow.com or any other free Illustrator wireframing kit you prefer. Download his free wireframing kit, as this will be a useful tool for some of the assets we will need to build out our website layout. Open up our newly created and modified sitemaps. Let's use these components to build out our homepage for the new site layout. Starting with the mobile screen, let's work from the top down. Consider navigation. Tabs on the top, a hamburger icon in the mobile, the header, titles, images, copy, where search, filter, and find go, and the footer file. It looks like we're missing a search piece in our ability to filter content. Let's find a place to include that on our mobile layout. Search should go within the navigation. Filter could be a drop-down list located in the grid content, like this. We are starting to gain an understanding of the context of our responsive layout. Through responsive knowledge and grid layouts, we can start building out our screens. We start with the toughest screen and move outwards. Designing from the mobile first and responsive web perspective allows us to build the best experiences. Practicing wireframing will allow you to speed up and be better at building experiences for the web. Up next in section 5 of this course, designing the homepage. Hello, and welcome back to section 5 of user experience for web developers. We are halfway through this course, and I hope you're getting a grasp on the vast world of making better user experiences. In the previous section, we started wireframing our mobile homepage, attempting to include clarity, understanding, and structure to our layouts. In this section, we will complete our homepage wireframe, understand the importance of envisioning an information ecosystem, format our new pages for information exchange and content chunking, and create some interaction. So let's get going. In this first video, we will create a new homepage. Homepages become a crucial aspect of any web page design, as you consider the homepage the face of the web page. Most users will see it first, and new users will learn about the structure, relate to the content, and navigate to and from throughout the structure of the website. When designing your homepage, it is important to keep in mind the concept of iteration. Iteration is the repetition of a process. In software and web design, iterations lead to new versions of pieces of computer hardware or software. Your first wireframe may not solve your web design problems and require changes along the way. Iterating design allows alterations in content, navigation, and structure before it gets placed into code. We are tackling the homepage of the website first in responsive, as it will lay tracks for all the other pages. At this point in the web design process, it is extremely cheap to make changes to the website and the wireframes. But as we move further down into design and code, changes become much more expensive. Wireframing is a chance to solve the problem the right way the first time. When sketching interfaces and relying on wireframing as a quick tool for exploring and defining your website options, you will in turn create better and more useful and faster designs. So let's learn how to improve our site layout and design. In the next video, we'll discuss envisioning an information ecosystem. Welcome back. Let's improve our homepage layout through a few UX concepts. Let's discuss information ecosystem. We will build content that connects to people. We'll review and maintain some consistency, and we'll complete wireframing for all our homepage screens. So let's get moving on these UX skills. Open your sitemap document. It should look like this. Our sitemaps allows us to see how all the pages of the site are connected. Now take a look at this visual. See how things are connected? This visual is more rhizomatic. A rhizome is usually a horizontal subterranean plant stem that is distinguished from its true root in possessing buds, nodes, and usually scale-like leaves. These connected pieces make your website more like an ecosystem than a series of one-way doors that go into each page. Our information architecture sitemaps are designed to visualize clarity, but we need to consider how our user can get around the site and not just through one channel of the navigation. Like the suggested content in Amazon, content is interconnected and built through a system that uses informational ecosystem structures and allows our user not only to have a better experience, but it also makes our content more useful. Let's get back into designing our homepage. Open up your homepage file, go to the artboards to go to the homepage mobile, and let's consider how our user gets around the site. These images can take them to pages. This navigation allows them for the same interaction. This link drop down allows users into a deeper view of content. And our homepage becomes a very nice way to connect our user into the ecosystem of the web page, where not everything is going to the same location. Now let's extend our structure into the tablet and desktop screens. Using the same layout, let's consider the tablet screen and allow the same rules we just applied to the mobile experience to stay consistent. Great user experiences are maintained through consistent interactions and also through testing and design clarity. Let's copy over the mobile layout content to the tablet. Good. First, you will notice that the content isn't following the responsive rules, so let's fix that. Let's now make sure we are considering some responsive web rules in Twitter and using their 3 breakpoints of mobile, tablet, and desktop. We are considering 3 breakpoints as a way to consider the important points in which a design can be viewed. Although there are more than 3 sizes and 3 device widths, it is unreasonable to design for every use case. We could keep the same primary navigation and just extend it out and copy and place over to the desktop as well. Okay, next, let's keep a consistent marquee experience, like we see on the mobile, just bigger, and extend and make it for the desktop as well. Next, let's have the content cascade up and create 2 columns on the tablet and 3 columns on the desktop, like this. Great, now you can start to see how the responsive grid applies to all 3 screens, and content scales and reorganizes as you move down and up in screen sizes. Let's make sure we start including a few details to match our sitemap. Going into the navigation, let's label each page. Do the same for the tablet and desktop. Good. You might remember building a hamburger for the navigation on the mobile version, so as to not waste screen real estate for the navigation. The phone can be so small, every pixel counts. Therefore, we find clever ways to hide and collapse navigation. Let's copy this artboard, like this, and change the label to artboard to homepage mobile navigation. Select the artboard tool, hold down Shift, and drag to the left. Now let's give it another layer. Label it mobile nav. Let's drop down a box over the side and put the navigation in the list. We are starting to flesh out the structure of the homepage. Through building our structure, we are setting rules about navigation, about layout, and about content sizing that will get repeated and used for the wireframes and designs of other pages. Plus, we're starting to see how designing all 3 pages together helps us think about the responsive web design process and what our user is going to experience. Up next in this video, formatting pages to enable information exchange and content chunking. Welcome back. I hope your responsive web designs are starting to become more clear and are starting to have more content definition from mobile through desktop. In this video, we're going to improve our homepage designs to match the needs we observed earlier. Remember, we are solving for people, and layout and wireframes are pieces in the process of solving for your users' problems. In that vein of helping our users, we will build out page formatting, create some information exchange, and discuss content chunking. So let's get moving on these web design fundamentals. Open up your wireframe homepage. Your homepage in responsive web designs are starting to take shape, and now we need to start considering our formatting. In the previous section, we discussed how our sitemap is clear, but how our user can get around a site should be more connected, like a rhizome or a network. Now let's start to make that happen. The marquee is showing us one image, but we could make it contain more content through a carousel. Let's have it have 5 sections. Include 5 dots and an arrow from left to right, and do this on all the screens. This piece of content also needs a CTA, or a call to action, which allows a user to take place and click on something to get content. Choose a consistent placement for your CTA buttons. Good. The dot and arrow are a familiar UI pattern for many users have experienced before and have learned that through other interfaces. Your website content should employ sound and strong information exchange tactics. A website is a bunch of code, but when your user sees it, it's images, copy, video, color typography, etc. And this information should have strong hierarchy, clear color, and simple interaction, along with great composition and legible type and images. When we design, we exchange information, and that information should attempt to come across as clear and precise and useful as possible. In the end, it needs to communicate, and we should strive to make our designs the best way to communicate that we can. A way to consider to help your users and design your content is to consider using content chunking. Content chunking is a strategy of breaking up content into shorter, bite-sized pieces that are more manageable and easier to remember. The chunking concept was created by Harvard psychologist George A. Miller in 1956. Miller said that short-term memory could only hold 5 to 9 chunks of information. This is the reason that a phone number is 7 to 10 digits. Now, go find places where you can apply these memory-saving tactics in your homepage designs. Consider content chunking your product information, the image, the title, the cost, the CTA, etc. By making groupings, your layout and composition will improve as well as your hierarchy. We are starting to gain an understanding of the content of our responsive layouts. Through responsive knowledge of grids and how things are laid out, we can start building out our screens. We started with the hardest screen and then moved outwards. In the next video, we'll consider how your website works. Welcome back. I hope your homepage wireframes are starting to become more clear and memorable through clear information exchange and the new content chunking tactics we discussed in the last video. In this video, we're going to discuss a few concepts in UX that repeat when building websites over and over again. We'll discuss forms, button design, the skeuomorphic versus discoverability, some discoverability tactics, some user interactions. So let's get moving on these web design fundamentals. If you have ever used a website, one thing you might remember engaging in is a login for the site. Logins require forms. Forms are likely an inevitable user interaction during your user's experience with a website, where it is either a login or an email form or purchasing an item or doing user feedback quizzes, questions, etc. Our website design has a set of forms that occur during a login process and during the checkout for a product. Due to this, let's review a few best practices that will help our forms be the best for our users. Forms have three parts. An input field has a label, a form field, and placeholder text. In that, we have options for labels, we have checkboxes or radio buttons. On the other hand, if we look at forms, buttons, usually call to actions, have a label and potentially have other things that include drop-down lists, field sets, or multiple choice. When interacting with a form, a user will be using either their keyboard on their desktop or a mobile screen's keyboard on their device. When interacting with a user, they should be given immediate feedback as to the correct status of the ask of the form. An example of a password, if done incorrectly, would have a box that is read until the correct rules are met by the system. There are many articles and tutorials on making good forms, but let's make sure to consider how a form makes our users feel. Forms require a user to submit, and that form would require a button. Buttons are a primary interaction moment for our users. The look and feel of these interaction moments can dictate the usability and types of interactions our users take. For example, Amazon moved a button in their checkout process and increased their total sales by 900 million a day. Buttons have four primary states. The normal state, which is idle. The active state, which is when you push it down. If you're in desktop, they potentially have a hover state, you roll over on the desktop. And then a visited state, which is I've been and visited that thing. When considering your buttons and how they might look and feel, you should consider that a button is a physical, tangible interaction. In considering that, there's a couple things you should know. There's skeuomorph, or a derivative object that retains ornamental design cues from structures that were originally not necessary. Think of the save icon being designed like a floppy disk. Many people have never even seen a floppy disk or know what it's used for, but it becomes a skeuomorph of what the action is. Here are a few tips to improving your interaction ideas. Put buttons where you can find them. Label your buttons for what they will do, i.e. submit or enter, and that label should be quick and descriptive of the action. Use a consistent color for buttons. Primary and secondary can be distinguished by size and color, and design can determine your user should be familiar with the primary interaction. Place in a reasonable order, stacking or placing them side by side. Don't use button designs for every link or navigation element. Use them for important user interactions. Your user should recognize that the design of a button and the use of the same button design for the same interactions. Your go-to link should be designed differently than your checkout button, for example, which will improve your user experience because they learn the difference between your interaction system and the rules that apply. A goal of a homepage and your website in general should be that it's easy to use. Therefore, you should help your user learn your website system quickly. Choosing a consistent button system and consistent navigation and avoiding drop-downs as they increase cognitive load or pop-ups as they surprise your users will keep your interface system easily learnable, which many confuse as being intuitive. Let's go apply some button designs to our homepage. Open up your wireframe file. Good. Now let's go and save a new version. Versioning is a good idea as you might iterate on the design decisions and want to go back and change it. Versioning allows us to do this, plus data is cheap and it will save you the headache if you have to go back at some point. So save as GS wireframe version 1.1. Good. Now let's place some button styles and think about the design. Move them so they're usable on the home page. like this. Great. We are starting to gain an understanding of how our web pages should apply forms, buttons, and good UI tactics. All these skills used together will improve not only the usability of your website, but also be a catalyst for great interactions and in turn a great user experience. Improving your knowledge about how to make the content more discoverable and learnable will continue to improve your user experience skills. Up next is section 6 of this course, Using Media, How to Consider Content in Your Web Page. Hello, and welcome to section 6 of our course. I hope you're getting familiar with how user experience lessons can be applied to your web design thinking. In the previous section, we started to learn about some interaction and how when applied to some of the concepts of our homepage, it can improve our experiences. In this section, we will be growing our user experience understanding by learning about media. We will relate and define some media and some of the terms, explore good and bad usage of media, and relate it using graphics. In the first video on media types, we're going to explore how to consider and use media during web design. So let's get going. Homepages are essential to a website, and they consist of content that can be images, GIFs, video, copy, social media. For implementing the design process, we need to have a knowledge of media and how and why and when to use it. We start with what is media? Media is an all-encompassing term that refers to a collective communicative mediums used to store and transmit information or data. Media is usually intended to inform or influence an audience. This is from Mashable. Media can come in the form of images, whether they're JPEGs, TIFFs, PNGs, PDFs. They can be videos, .movies, MP4s, H.264, etc. They can be sound files. They can be streaming. They can also be graphics of CSS or WebGL or PNG or fonts or SVGs. And they can be copy, which is, whether it's web-safe typography or Google fonts or SVG fonts or typecast, etc. All media shows up on a website has some requirements from a web hosting system. For example, if you wanted a video to show up on your homepage in the marketplace, one potential way to deal with this media content could be to upload the video to a YouTube which stores the media. YouTube is owned by Google and they have their own servers and they use their own video processing and viewing process. And this enables the video to be placed onto your homepage. This would allow you to use Google's CDN or content delivery network and their servers transmit that content to your users through your webpage. Servers that transmit the content and use YouTube's media player technology allow the people to watch it. A pro of using YouTube is you can offload the technical hurdles in playback and video buffering. The disadvantage is that views get captured by YouTube, and the content is made available on YouTube, which is part of their advertising model. Another way can be that you take the same video and upload it as a source file to your own server, and then build or purchase your own media players on your own webpage. A pro to this is that you have proprietary rights over your own media and where it is stored, and you own the server space. The disadvantage is that it can lead to poor playback. There's potential media overload if the content gets served up to too many users. However, there are other outside competition to other than YouTube, which is like Vimeo or Whistler or others that are coming up. As a sample of something interesting that uses video on the homepage, let's take a look at a couple of websites that use media in a unique way. toolofnorthamerica.com homepage. The video autoplays and has animation of titles. If we go to sagmeisterwelsh.com, navigation is in a space, and the video uploads every few seconds, looping in the background. There are many samples of unique uses of media on websites. I recommend you create a catalog of the pages that you come across that inspire you that use media in an interesting way, and bookmark them, or even use Pinterest or any other storing. The web is an always evolving, and as a web designer, you need to keep up and keep your finger on the pulse of how media is being used and experimented with through the web. Videos, images, type, interactive experiences, and feedback loops for your users are all aspects that you need to consider when building and maintaining a great user experience. We are beginning to gain an understanding of how media should be considered, and knowing what is possible is half the challenge when trying to consider a new user experience. Up next, let's choose the correct usage. In the next video, we'll discuss media annoyances, what to avoid when choosing media. Welcome back. I hope you're starting to explore and see how media is used in unique ways across the web. In a previous video, we saw the different types of media. In this video, we're going to improve our media knowledge to build better user experience. We're going to explore what your users want from media. We're going to discuss bad media usage, and we're going to consider size and content. We're also going to define the types of media our webs should use in its redesign. So let's get moving on these web design fundamentals. When considering the kinds of media you're going to put in front of your user, it is useful to consider their needs. For our website, we can apply some values for what our user wants from our site. One, they want it to be fast, especially if it's on mobile. Two, easy to navigate, the depth of the page, how big it is. Three, we can probably assume that it's visual first with type as context and support. And four, another value should be that it's clear and unambiguous. Based on these values, you can start to establish a few things from the media that will come out of it. If it's fast, that means we might use little or no video, maybe not even any animations. Images that aren't very big and that are not next to other items. Graphics are minimal and typographic is web safe. If it's easy to navigate, that might equal simple interactions, clear page distinction. If it's visual first, this might mean image-driven interaction, but that aren't too big in their case size to be fast loading on their mobile devices. And if it's clear and unambiguous, this might lead to a simple color palette, 3 to 5 colors, and interaction moments that have clear states and discoverability. Based on this, let's go apply these values to our homepage wireframes through some annotations, like we had done on our webpage. Open up your newest version of your wireframes. If you don't have an annotations layer, add a new layer. Good. Now let's label a few media items on the website that help us determine what types of media we're going to be looking at. Label this product image, its size, take a look at it. Okay, we can see that it's 300 by 600 pixels. Indicate in the description of the image so that the scale should proportionally be based on the percentages inside the CSS container, like we discussed when building out our Bootstrap framework grids. Great. Now we can go through and define some of the other items on the page. If you haven't completed all the annotations, you can come back to finish after we go through the remaining sections. Annotations become an incredibly important aspect of user experience, as most of the time you're working in groups and others need to understand what is on the page and why. This is especially important for developers. Now let's discuss some bad usage of media so that we can continue to refine and iterate our wireframes so we don't make any of these mistakes in our experience. Building great user experience is about knowing what annoys our users and to try and avoid those issues. Some common bad media usages with websites are: 1. Auto-playing music. Auto-playing can be very distracting and should be engaged by your user if you have it at all. Just think of the case of somebody opening up a website or something in a meeting that gets pulled up. Another thing that you should avoid is extremely large files or videos. Large videos degrades on mobile experience and is slow to be pulled up, and plus churns through people's data. Navigation that requires multiple backs in your browser are also annoying, like you're too deep in a site and you have to use your browser to navigate around. Consider that the browser is the parent navigation and that internal pages should be handled by their own navigation, i.e. breadcrumbing. Using excessive pop-ups or tooltips can also be frustrating for your user. Finally, ads over content. Ads can help drive revenue, but especially when purchasing an item, you don't want to be bombarded by ad content. We could also consider loud fonts and crazy colors. Screens are already complicated, and having type that is hard to read or in all caps yelling at you can destroy a user's experience from a design perspective. Avoiding these annoyances and keeping in mind our users' values will engender an attitude to build better experiences for your users. We start to gain an understanding of the bad uses of media, and when looking at it, start to give yourself values and start to say, how can I start avoiding these bad experiences? Up next in this course, using graphics, how to improve our user experience through graphics. Welcome back. We're starting to get a handle on how media is used and what type of media users find annoying or successful when designing user experiences. Now let's consider the use of graphics for our websites. In this video, we're going to take a look at PNGs, web icons in SVG, WebGL, and vector graphics. We're going to discuss fast rendering and in-browser visualization, and we're going to consider the types of graphics that we should consider when designing our user interfaces. We'll explore graphics for good and not just graphics for graphics' sake. So let's get moving on these web design skills. When considering the design of a web page, we need to consider our user's needs. In the previous section, we defined some values. One, that it was fast, easy to navigate, visual first with type as contextual support, and clear and unambiguous. This, when applied to our media, is small images, limited use of video, but when we apply it to our graphics, it should stay the same. Based on these values, you can establish a few things from our media when we were talking about graphics. A graphic is any background element, color, pattern, line, texture, that helps add layers or visual importance to the layout or composition. Graphics can be applied through a few aspects of your website system. It can be part of your iconography, which is probably the most recognizable use of graphics. Iconography is a visual image or symbol used to represent or be used to stand in for language. Think of cave painting. Icons become essential in navigation learning and can help your user get around and learn how to use your website. Icons should be understandable from the first sight, easy for home, for example, but harder for other aspects of your site. When considering the design of these elements, there are a few things you need to keep in mind. One, how will your browser render these graphics in the website? Is it a PNG or a JPEG? Is it a font? Or is it an SVG/vector file? A PNG or JPEG is an image that has an instance on a server. A font, like Font Awesome, is an open source set of CSS code-based visuals that have a CSS prefix tag and established sizes. Fonts come preloaded and are faster to design within CSS. In a set of custom-built graphics, whether 2D or 3D, using SVG, which stands for Scalable Vector Graphics, or WebGL, we can consider an icon as one instance of a graphic, but can be made fast through rendering through SVG. SVG are a user format that allows quick rendering by a browser and are infinitely scalable depending on the browser. When using graphics, there is a question you should ask yourself. Is this necessary, or is it increasing the K-weight of the page? K-weight is the total file size to render a web page. Low k-weight equals fast. High k-weight equals slow. Graphics, although useful, can sometimes be superfluous and should be removed whenever possible. Based on this, let's go apply these ideas of graphics usage to our homepage. Open up your wireframe file. If you want to use some icons, let's go to fontawesome.com and download the CSS font. Install the OTF open format font by double-clicking the font file, and turn your font on so that the open source icons in your navigation. View the font in Illustrator by opening up your glyphs table in the characters dialog. Find and use the home, shirt, paper, and store icons. Good. Consider other places you might have graphics or icons, but consider the rules of its necessity. Great. Now, in the annotations, let's determine that these icons are from SVG and are from Font Awesome. We are starting to gain an understanding of how and why to use graphics and their different types. Although our technology is constantly improving, using SVG can cause issues. So remember your web page values and use graphics for good and for your users' ability to learn your system and keep the speed of your website up. Using graphics for good user experience. You can also use caniuse.com to understand its value. Up next is section 7 of this course, where we will discuss best practices and usability for improving user experience through some tried and true UX practices. See you there. Welcome back to section 7 of our course. We are starting to really get some knowledge under our belts about user experience design. In the previous section, we started to learn how media starts to play a key aspect in our content and the structure of our websites. Homepages are essential to the website, but only if the content is usable. In this section, we'll be growing our user experience understanding by learning about best practices. We will define some best practices in usability, we'll explore where you can find them, and then why we use them for better user experience. In the first video on best practices, we will explore how user experience is improved by all the UX community. Let's get going. During our design process, we became familiar with how and why users engage in content and how to build for them. This is where best practices and usability come into the picture. What are best practices? A best practice is an industry-held agreement for the most efficient and effective way to accomplish a desired task. Many best practices are also standardized inside interaction guidelines for corporations, products, and software. Best practices usually consist of a technique, process, or methodology to produce a desired outcome. Best practices exist in nearly every industry. However, they have become specifically relevant inside the user experience and interaction and development communities, as much of our output revolves around data and business processes. Best practices in the user experience world are seen as steps taken to make our products and services, 1, more usable, like a calendar app, 2, more profitable, think of companies like Uber, and bug-free, which is things like Google search. Best practices in user experience are connected to usability factors because what we build is ultimately used by other humans, and we want to learn and hopefully repeat for our users. Let's review some of the common best practices that our typical UX designer should know. 1. Keep content as concise as possible. The web is a fast medium, especially when we consider mobile first. So keep it quick and understandable. 2. Use headings to break up long content. Web pages scroll. And you can keep your user far more engaged through breaking up the content with headers. This is especially important as content scales down to a single page on your mobile device. But this also applies to the content chunking we discussed earlier. Number 3, when designing a list, use a bulleted or zebra text formatting for clarity. This helps you know what is listed and it improves legibility. For hyperlinks, you want to make them as user-friendly as possible. Blue with an underline is an HTML standard for a hyperlink. Jacob Nielsen, who we discussed earlier, established this standard and made buttons clear and interaction states clear, the unvisited, selected, and visited states. Number 5, use visuals strategically. Visuals should enhance legibility and be supportive to the use of headings and concise content. Best practices are growing, an ever-changing set of guidelines that all user experience designers should be aware of. The web is being used by billions every second, and that means we learn from that process. And how we build experiences is constantly in flux. Some places you can go to keep up with best practices are the Norman Nielsen group at nngroup.com. You can also explore the w3.org, which is the development group that maintains the web standards. Or Mashable.com has a website usability tips. Smashing Magic Magazine also keeps up on best practices, and many UX articles and blogs will also discuss best practices. There are many, many more, and the conversation is never stopping. Best practices can be seen in a cooking analogy. Best practices are the ingredients in building a great user experience. Like cooking, the challenge is combining the right mix of ingredients to get the desired outcomes by a good cook. And a good cook tastes his ingredients first. You can guarantee a quality product if you know that you're using the freshest ingredients. And if you're using the best practices, that results in a better user experience. It is both science and art, and you should be learning and experimenting with new combinations of best practices for whatever problem you're solving on the web. Up next, we'll discuss mobile best practices, how to improve a mobile website user experience. Welcome back to Mobile Best Practices. I hope you're getting started to explore the best practices for web design. In this video, we're going to improve our best practices when it comes to mobile devices. We'll discuss why mobile first matters, explore some mobile best practices, and apply some of these best practices to our wireframes. So let's get moving on these web design fundamentals. Out of the gate, we now are starting to think about web design through the lens of our users. This is key to user experience design. This thinking also leads us down the road of responsive web design so that we can meet our users on their mobile platforms. Mobile uniquely separates from the desktop experience. In human-computer interaction terms, mobile represents a new paradigm of interacting with a computer, onset by the touch-sensitive screen and the changing ways we interact with the computer. The challenge is that we have to consider both interaction models, the mouse and the keyboard for the desktop, and the touch for the mobile and tablet devices. Therefore, let's learn some best practices that we should consider for touch screen. 1. Keep headings short. Any heading that wraps to 2 lines pushes contents down the page, thus eating up screen real estate on a mobile screen. So that applies to keeping things concise. Number 2, put labels above the form inputs. Using top-aligned labels makes sure that your user does not have to pinch and zoom to use the input when they're filling out a form or directing an input content. Number 3, use placeholder text on small and common form inputs. Search does not need a label, but it should get a grayed out placeholder type. Number 4, pop-ups are distracting. Window management on mobile can be a pain for your users and can take your user out of their experience. So consider how users are confronted with messages, pop-ups, or anything that requires them to close. Number 5, make your default type 14 pixels or 1 EM. It is the right thing to do for legibility, and don't go under 12 pixels as you want users to be able to read. Number 6, respect the fat finger. Not all of your users will be as dexterous as you would like. Make your touch targets large as 44 pixels by 44 pixels, and give your targets a lot of margin so that the intended action is not a mistake. There are many more best practices for mobile that are changing with every new release of a new phone or a new operating system. So let's go apply some of these best practices to our mobile wireframes. Open up your wireframes file. Great. Now let's go apply some of these best practices that we learned from above. Some low-hanging fruit is the type size. Go and adjust any type that is a copy to 14 points in type terms. Good. Next, let's apply short headings to our content. Great. Now let's make sure our buttons and navigation follows the 44 pixel by 44 pixel hit state, along with giving those enough margins so that your user won't make a mistake. Remember that best practices are not mutually exclusive, and that sound best practices for layout and image usage are also applicable for your mobile web. Great. Now apply some of these changes to your tablet layout, as it also considers the mobile needs. Awesome. Your mobile is the hardest screen to design because it's the smallest. And this is also because the place where best practices become most relevant and have the biggest impact on your user experience. Mistakes on best practices will become more evident on a smaller screen as they allow your users to focus on the problem. Up next in this course, desktop best practices, how using lessons from a group of practitioners over time improves user experience. Welcome back. In the previous sections, we were starting to get a handle on the best practices in general for our mobile experience. Now let's go apply some of these learnings to our desktop experience. In this video, we're going to improve our media savvy and best practices. Review some desktop best practices, define which we should use, apply these practices to our wireframes, and review the entire responsive web design for using the same best practices. So let's get moving on these UX skills. If you remember, we discussed 1. Keeping content as concise as possible. 2. Using headings to break up long content. 3. Using bulleted lists or zebra text formatting for clarity. 4. Making hyperlinks as user-friendly as possible. 5. Using visuals strategically, which is trying to keep the K-weight and composition clear. And a few more that apply to us are 6. Optimizing your images for speed and quality. If you use a background image, a pattern, or a texture, make sure it is as small as you can make it and it looks good, because it can quickly increase your page weight. 7. Use appropriate and consistent icons. Icons are about clarity and choosing the icons that are similarly designed but also communicate clearly their purpose. And 8. Making registration forms as short as possible. Users don't want to input a novel to get involved, and onboarding should be easy and gather essential details to be augmented after the user has been pulled into the experiments. Some other things that we can do for desktop SEO are things like optimizing your alt tags and always specifying the image height. Make sure that this content does not jump around on the page once an image loads. There are many more best practices for desktop that are changing with every new release of an iPhone or new browser updates. But let's apply some of these best practices to our wireframes. Open your wireframe file. Great. Now let's go apply our newly learned best practices. Some low-hanging fruit is the type size. Adjust any labels and CTAs to be concise as possible. Great. Next, apply any bullets or zebra ink to the lists. Good. Now let's make sure our buttons and navigation to follow and use appropriate icons at the 44 pixel by 44 pixel height. Next, we could go and define the image sizes and make sure that it applies itself across all screens. To avoid the K-weight issue by estimating our background as a solid CSS color, I'm going to create it with a dark gray. It's looking pretty good. Now remember, best practice should be applied retroactively. If you learn and internalize more, then you will start to inherently build your wireframes and layouts using best practices first. Keep learning more, and you will improve your user experiences over time. If you keep your familiarity with the desktop and mobile best practices and how they apply in solving the design and web experiences, you will just improve your speed on task and build better web experiences. Up next in this course, we're going to discuss usability, making your user experience work consistently. Welcome back. I hope that you are starting to internalize best practices for your web design processes. At the core, a best practice is rooted in making the web a more familiar and useful entity. And a lot of best practices are applied in order to improve usability. In this video, we're going to improve our website usability. We're going to take a look at what is usability, how it is applied to heuristics, review our current wireframes using a heuristic scale. So let's get moving on these web design fundamentals. Usability refers to how learnable a human-made object is. That object can be a software app, a website, or a product. Usability becomes a factor in what a user experience designer produces, and we are judged upon how learnable and usable our solutions are. Usability is a challenging aspect of user experience design because of the scale of our users' age, familiarity with technology, and intellectual level. We have to consider our users' goals and make our systems the most useful for that implied goal. In user experience, we strive to make the most useful and usable websites as we can. There are many variables involved in making the best experience, and we must consistently be evaluating our solutions for its usability. A user experience designer can use a heuristics evaluation to inspect and understand the usability of their website. A heuristics evaluation is a series of tests and questions aimed at identifying usability issues and involving and recognizing usability as a principle. The heuristics evaluation was created by Jacob Nielsen and includes 10 factors that are scored on a 0 to 10 point scale system. The system is made up of these 10 points. 1. The visibility of the system. A system should have appropriate feedback and message. 2. Match between the system and the real world. A system should familiarize its users through their users' language and implied interactions. Number 3. User control and freedom. A user often chooses the system's functions by mistake. Number 4. Consistency and standards. A user shouldn't have to wonder about the difference between actions and that do the same thing. Number 5. Error prevention. Better than a good message when a user makes a mistake, like forgetting to enter a required form, user avoids error through good usability. Number 6. Recognition rather than recall. Minimize the memory load on the user by keeping the options visible. Number 7. Flexibility and efficiency of use. A user can customize interaction or reorder to make their experience more efficient for them. Number 8. Aesthetic and minimalist design. A user is not confronted with superfluous objects or noisy visuals and design elements. Number 9. help users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. Errors should express in common language and help the user fix any issues, most common when filling forms out. And number 10, help and documentation. Systems helps the user to learn for the first time or has some way to do step-by-step and clear directions. In general, 5 users can spot about 85% of usability problems. We do the best we can, but you should get others to test your work. And a key aspect of user experience design is allowing users to give you feedback. You should get others to test your work. But in the absence of letting somebody else look at your work, let's take out a piece of paper and write down the 10 heuristics to test it on ourselves. Good. Put a number 1 through 10 under each number. What we're going to do is we're going to test our homepage wireframes. Great. So let's open up our homepage wireframe. Using the scale that we discussed above in the heuristics, go through each step and give your web pages a score. Great. The more you become familiar with heuristics usability, the better your web designs will be. Sometimes a user experience designer is not doing a redesign of a web page like we are in this course. But you will have to come in and diagnose what's wrong with a website. Your knowledge of best practices, usability, and heuristics will assist you in not just articulating the experience of a website, but allow you to quantify it and give it a way forward. It is hard to assess yourself, and you should make it a habit of getting your work into other people's hands to critique, or even test its usability. However, for the sake of the practice, let's practice our own heuristics evaluation on ourselves and be critical of our own work, just like you have never seen it before. Sometimes the key of being a user experience designer is wiping your brain of the work you've just done and looking at it with fresh eyes. Heuristics evaluations assist in that process. Up next in this course, applying usability to our homepage. Welcome back. I hope you are starting to relate how best practices, usability, and heuristics are applicable to the user experience design when building your great websites. In this video, we're going to take the things we've learned from our heuristics evaluation and apply those learnings back to our homepage. We're going to discuss potential issues, and we're going to improve our homepage usability. So let's get started. Open up your homepage. In the last section, we built a heuristic scale to evaluate our usability of our homepage. Pull out your piece of paper that should have your 10 heuristic sections and the scale of 1 to 10 for each of the scores that you applied to the section. Let's review your score. I gave myself a 78 out of 100, making my usability land at a C+. What did you give yourself? If yours was a super high score, then you need to be more critical of your current wireframe layout and its perceived usability. Use the heuristic scale on another website to test your evaluation skills and see if they match up for you being honest with your own solutions, which is important. Remember, usability is not a given. It is worked for and applied through sound use of best practices, great design, and clear values of what your users should be experiencing. Here is where I gave the current layout some low scores. User control and freedom. I gave it a 6 out of 10. The only place our user can explore and has freedom in this system is in the search, and maybe in the marquee here, where I can go left and right. We could improve this by adding more interactivity to the images so that the user has freedom not only to scroll through the marquee, but to see individual products. I also gave consistency and standards an 8 out of 10. Recognize rather than recall. I also gave that a 6 out of 10. The navigation has a drop-down effect. It requires a lot of memory from our user. So we could consider removing this. and require our user to dive into the primary section and then filter or focus on their information. I also gave the aesthetic and the minimalist a 6 out of 10, where we are placing a lot of content per content section. So let's remove some copy and fix the containers to be more simple, like this. Good. Evaluation cycles become incredibly important when designing web pages because it's easy to get caught up in all the deadlines and can feel like something that slows down the process. However, if the user experience designer is evaluating the solution for optimized usability, then it might help avoid user issues and avoid expensive redesigns at a later date. Usability is a key building component for making great user experiences. And if it is only considered after it is built and put in front of users, it can be more time-consuming and more expensive to fix retroactively. Any user experience designer is worth his or her weight in salt just by providing great usability and applying the principles of best practices and heuristics throughout the wireframing and development process. But only if they're applying those correctly. We will be fleshing out the rest of our website and using the lessons and tips learned here about best practices and usability, and should be applied to the same importance for the interior pages and especially to the forms and the checkout pages that we'll be designing later. Up next, in Section 8 of this course, Wireframing 2, Mobile First. Welcome back to Section 8 of our course. We are really starting to get rolling with our user experience skills. In the previous section, we started to learn about how to apply usability and heuristics evaluation to our user experience and our website designs. These usability factors and our best practices knowledge will be applied as we continue to wireframe out the rest of our website experience. In this section, we'll be growing our web design skills by building out more of our website. Wireframing is a process that should consider the system you are designing for, as well as your user. We are going to be circling back and using the thinking from Section 4, the first section of wireframing, to complete our website. In this section, we'll talk about wireframing mobile screens, wireframing tablet screens, wireframing desktop screens. Then we'll review our usability and our media usage and complete the website user experience. So let's get going. In the first video on wireframing mobile screens, we'll take a look at designing the next section of our site and checking off pages from our sitemap. Any website is a system of interconnected pages and interactions. And when we design, we need to consider the end-to-end user experience. How a user comes in to the website and what device do they use, and then how do they leave and under what circumstances. The web used to be one modality, i.e. just the computer. But nowadays, a user might start a website on their computer, then look at it on their phone, and then complete the transaction on their tablet. All these actions are asynchronous, which makes thinking about user experiences more crucial. If we want our experiences to be usable, fast, clear, and we're going to add pleasurable and fun, we should continue to work from the hardest screen first to accomplish these values when continuing to build our website pages out. Let's open up our user flow document from the earlier section of screenflow.ai. We observed our user enter the action method section of the site. We are going to build out more of our website screens for each of these major sections to complete our website system. Designing in the same pattern as your observation of a user task is a useful tactic when designing out pages. Open up your wireframe document, GS wireframes. We have a set of homepage with 3 screens. Using the Artboards tool, let's copy and create the next page template, or wireframes for your site. You could do this through multiple methods. You could copy or paste, or you could save as and create a new file for the next section. In this case, I'm going to keep them all up on one page and copy the artboards so that we can see them together. Hold down the Shift when you're in the artboard section and drag the page below. Now let's label each of these artboards to help us keep our document organized. We will be working on the content section. So label the copied artboards as content, AC desktop, content 1, AC tablet, content 1, AC mobile. I'm using AC as action method to follow our user path. Great. Now let's repeat this process for the next major template. Although we are leaning on Illustrator for our wireframes production, there are many tools including Sketch, OmniGraffle, UXPin, Axure, etc. And you may choose any software tool that fits your needs best. But we'll continue to use Illustrator moving forward. We're going to create things for the content detail. Here's 3 pages for that. We'll repeat for the shopping cart, 3 screens for that. And last but not least, we'll include one for a checkout section. And we'll label that with checkout. Now that we have a majority of our pages that make up our web system, let's start wireframing each of these sections as we discussed when building out our homepage. We're going to start by going through mobile first. Let's go back to the content template that we created with sitemap and consider what these sections need to do. If you remember, the content pages allow users to look at content in a grid and scroll down the page to explore content. Our pages should continue to use this organization. Let's use the same wireframe assets from the homepage to structure our content template. This page needs 1, a title. I think using a featured sale product at the top could help move more information, so we could do that with it here. And then we could create a grid of products on the mobile screen, which could mean we go put 2 up across at a minimum, like this. We need to include a way to filter or search, so let's pull that down and add there. And then we need to end the page with a footer. Great. Now let's go back and include some best practices into the titles and selection of buttons, like this. Awesome. In the next section, we will consider how to scale up, expand this from tablet to desktop. And let's move to the content detail. Go down to the next template, the content detail for the mobile screen. Content detail needs a title, like this. It needs a featured or zoom of a product that slides left to right, which we saw here. Below is a description, so we can copy that and add. We need to include the price, so this is a new section. A way to purchase, so this is a CTA or a button. And then potentially a way to share, which is social. Okay, starting to maybe look like this. Just doing the mobile pages first so that we keep a consistent experience between this modality. We're then going to go into the shopping cart. Shopping cart needs a page title. It needs the item that you added to the cart, so space to show that. It needs the item price, the number, and the information of what you put in the cart. It needs a checkout button, and it needs a back to shopping button, and a footer. Okay, we're starting to get there. The next template is the checkout on a mobile screen. This page is going to need a page title. It's going to need your image that you're purchasing. It's going to need a checkout form. This is where best practices become really important that we discussed before. Checkout forms need your name, your address, your billing address. That could be a toggle checkbox that says that they're both. Purchase options, whether it's credit card form or PayPal, and a footer. Great. Our website, from a mobile perspective, is starting to get more complete. When designing a web system, we need to consider thinking through the entire platform and how a user goes from entry through purchasing of a product. We have made the screen flow from the hardest experience on the mobile view, moving from entering through cart and checking out. Up next in video, we're going to flesh out the tablet wireframes. Welcome back. I hope that you're starting to flesh out your web system with all the mobile pages and getting them wired out. We move pretty quickly, so don't feel the constraint to do it all during these videos. In this video, we're going to improve our web system by expanding our wires out to the tablet formats, defining some content experiments, and applying some best practices to our wireframes. So let's get moving to expand out our wireframe system. We have started to define our wireframe system and build out one vertical of the mobile experience. Now let's start to flesh out our wireframes even more. Let's expand our wireframe by building out for the tablet. A tablet has two views, and the portrait view is often the same size as the desktop because it's 1024 by 768. So we're going to be designing for the 900, the 768 version. Keeping in mind that we need to keep short headings. Add any heading that wraps into two lines, pushes content down the page, and eats up screen real estate. 2, putting labels above form inputs and using top-aligned labels makes sure that your user doesn't have to pinch and zoom to input and lose their label context. 3, use the placeholder text on small and common form inputs and search operations to help your user search and fill in the correct label. Make sure pop-ups aren't being overused, because remember, window management on mobile is a pain. 5, default at 14 point. And 6, respect your fat fingers. All these things we're going to apply as we build out these next pages. So open up your wireframing doc. If you want to, save a version. It helps us go back. If you remember, the content pages allow users to look at content in a grid and scroll down the page to explore that content. Our page can continue to use this organization. So let's use the same wireframe assets on the home page to structure our content template. Using the ideas set down in the mobile view, let's expand on the tablet. Copy, move over to your tablet. We need to include a page title next. I think using a featured sale product at the top could help move this information. This is the same, it just is going to get larger in your tablet. Next, we're going to have a grid. In your mobile view, we had 2 up, but I think the products could go to 3 across on the tablet. Include a way to filter that starts to center, and then end your page with a footer. It's the same content, you're just including more opportunities for that to occur in your tablet. Great. Now let's go back and include best practices into the titles and selection buttons as we move into tablet. Awesome. In the next section, we'll consider how to scale up and expand this to the tablet and desktop, and let's move the content and let's move into the content detail to accomplish that. Go to the next template, or the content detail in the mobile screen. Content detail needs a title, right? With the same information that we're just going to move and port over across into the tablet view. Things get larger, but we feature the zoom product and it slides from left to right, but that we can make that bigger and include small images inside the carousel. Okay. Below, we need a description. That description can get a little wider, right? You can see that the text is fluid. We need to include a price. a way to purchase, which is the CTA, and a way to share. It's the same interactions and features, it just, you're allowed more space and things should scale and respond the way that we want them to. Include a button and a footer. Great. Next, we're going to apply the same things for the shopping cart from the mobile screens into the tablet. Again, copy over. You need the same content, but something starts to get a little bigger. So you need the page title. You include the shopping cart items and increase size. Maybe those things go next to each other rather than stacked. You need an item price and number info that all goes on this right column. You need the checkout button. And then you need the back to shopping button in the upper left corner. This is following the same system. You just start to get your navigation in the tablet view. And then you need a footer. You can see this starts to repeat itself. Granted, we did one vertical, but you could start working these things back and forth. Next, we're going to take the tablet checkout screen. Again, similar, you need a page title. That item of the detail gets bigger. You have your checkout form, which also gets bigger. You have your purchase options, your credit card, your PayPal, those things also get larger. Maybe they extend and the content is easier to select. And then your footer gets wider. Great. You can see our web system is starting to get more complete. All the pages from mobile to tablet. Now we need to clean up any discrepancies on the tablet versions as we move from template to template. Go back through and keep type consistency and include appropriate size increases for buttons and image sizes that matches the tablet grid. We are starting to see how this system is working between screens and fleshing out major sections of the website. Up next, we're going to do this exact same process, but moving from tablet to desktop. And this will complete our responsive wireframing. See you then. Welcome back. Our website wireframes are starting to flesh themselves out and becoming more useful for illustrating how our users get around our site. In this video, we're going to improve our wireframings by completing out the desktop views and completing our web system. We're going to build out the desktop wireframe planning. We're going to complete our wireframes for each template, and we'll review so that the entire responsive web design system is complete. So let's get moving on these wireframes. Open your wireframing document. You can save a new version in case you make some changes that you don't like. It's always smart not to overwrite your work. The content pages allow your users to look at content in a grid and scroll down the page to explore content, like we could see here. Our pages could continue to use this organization. Let's use the same wireframe assets from the content section on the tablet and copy them over to the desktop. Using the same ideas set down in the mobile view and the tablet view, let's extend that to the desktop. Again, your content doesn't increase or go away, it just scales or gets different as it goes to desktop. You still have a page title, these things just start to increase, right? But what we can see is that where we had a product of 3 across, we could do 5 across on the desktop. Now you can see how the responsive is starting to work on your content section. Next, let's go back and explore some best practices for the titles and the selection buttons as we move into desktop. This is about consistency between screens. Great, some things could get a little bigger, they could get scaled, they can move a little bit, but it stays consistent. Go down the page and make sure that your templating content for the mobile screens uses 1, details in your titles, concise. 2, that your featured zoom product with a slide left or right and make it bigger, but you could also include little small images for the carousel for context. We need to increase our description below. That could increase in size. Make sure to include your price, which is here. A way to purchase, which is your CTA button. That can maybe get bigger. And a way to share. Again, the content is the same between sections. You just increase your spacing or your ability to look at pages. Now that we're starting to flush out the content section, let's go down and do the shopping cart. Again, copy the content from the tablet into the desktop and rearrange so that it fits. You can increase some sizes. You can move your item price and your info, and you can increase some of the size on that. Your checkout button and shopping button and back to shopping should start to stay in the same places, but you start to increase the system, and your footer gets bigger, fills in the space. Great. We're starting to complete that system too. As you can see, this starts to speed us up because we have most of this thinking done on the mobile, the tablet, and now the desktop. Let's go into the next template, which is the checkout mobile screen. Again, copy your content from your tablet view onto your desktop and rearrange some of the information. It should look the same. There should be relative structure and layout fundamentals, but you still have a page title, you still have image details, you can make that bigger. Your checkout form, the name, the address, that stuff could get a little bigger. Your purchase options, those could get bigger. The desktop has the affordance of more space and more relationships. But the content is the same between your mobile view and your desktop view. We are getting the whole set of templates flushed out at this point. And you can see that it moves pretty fast as we've made decisions from the mobile view, the hardest view, to the desktop view, which is easiest, purely based on space. You need to consider that our pages and templates are not designed mutually exclusive from each other. Responsive web design makes all of our sections connected. And now that we have the whole system wireframed out, we need to review it for continuity and responsive consistency, because we're making a user experience for all pages, not just for one. Go through each section and template and make sure that there are no inconsistencies in its content, its context, or how each screen is considering its size and its grid. Things should look like they fit together. The hardest content requirement page is the content template. This is the one that uses the grid of products that views a lot of stuff. Let's make sure that the amount for the wireframe is as it was that we showed. As you can see, we only put 2 up in the grid for the mobile, but that's actually not accurate to the content requirement. So let's increase the size of that artboard and add more items to that grid. That also then applies across the board to the tablet and the desktop. Obviously, the mobile pushes more content down the page, but the tablet and the desktop can handle more in their grids, respectively, from 2 up to 3 up to 5 up. Great. Now we can see that our content is starting to reside and there's some consistency between templates and what's there. Wireframing is a fast and quick way to explore the systems and the layout of our website as a whole. As you build out these wireframes, you should be taking some steps back to make sure that your pages work together, not just as individuals on their own. But also, as screen sizes change, you can relate between their systems. Building websites for responsive design requires a lot more thinking up front. But as you build out the experience, you can see that it pays off in the end to design and create more useful and, importantly, more viewable websites for your audience. Up next is section 9, prototyping, creating clickable wireframes. Welcome to section 9 of our course. At this point, we're starting to cook with some fire, as we've completed our wireframing of our entire system. In the previous section, we fleshed out the remaining sections of our responsive web design and completed the wireframes for our system. In this section, we'll be growing our web design skills by building a clickable wireframe prototype to help us explore our solutions in action. In this video, we'll be defining why to prototype, plan our clickable prototype flow, build out some interaction states, and create a prototype using the Envision app prototyping software. So let's get going. Designing the whole system allows us as user experience designers to visualize and see the connections for the experience we are crafting. Now we will take the system and put the action through a prototype. In this first video, we will connect our wireframes into a clickable prototype. A prototype is an early stage model for a solution of a machine, product, or interaction of a service or a website. Prototyping attempts to be a fast and cheap way to validate and test an idea before bringing it to market or developing it in live code. In user experience, we use prototypes all the time to test interactions, explore our solutions, and evaluate and test our experiences. The web is inherently interactive, and we need to build our thinking and test our reach to reach that expectation. This is where clickable wireframes come into the mix. This prototyping process allows us to connect our static wireframes, the pages that we built in Illustrator, and build a way for us to use and move through our website wireframes. Typically, clickable wireframes are used to review how interactions are going to be applied to the system. They allow reviewers and clients to experience the system rather than just look at a series of static pages. Clickable wireframes can be robust and appear like everything is built, or can just be used to explore one aspect of a web system. For our convenience, we are going to build a clickable wireframe prototype that allows us to move through the pages we have wireframed to test our system. Let's open up our wireframe project. All the responsive pages are laid out in a grid. We need to plan out a flow through the website we then will build for our clickable prototype. Let's make sure our user explores the website in this manner in order to explore the system. Just like we observed our user, let's go from the homepage landing to the product page to the product detail to adding to a shopping cart to checking out to confirming and then to returning to product detail. Let's review our current wireframes and make sure that all these sections are wireframed. If you notice, we have the flow we just discussed is similar to the screen flow that we observed from our users. We have downgraded the screen flow as a way to make our clickable prototype more direct and on purpose. As a prototype, our plan should explore a process or an action. Like, how does a user get through the website? Or how many clicks does it take to adding a product to a cart? Or how does the user interact with the content? Planning for prototyping is about walking through an experience. Prototypes are incredibly useful tools. However, beware that they can become complex very quickly. A prototype should be used to test an idea. Clicking through a wireframe makes it more engaging, and it then helps us to build and craft the experience. Up next in video will be wireframing steps for prototyping. Welcome back to building a clickable wireframe. I hope that you're starting to flesh out your clickable prototype plan. We have started to define our clickable prototype to build out a flow. Now let's start to flesh out our wireframes for this interaction. In this video, we're going to improve our wireframe prototype for a clickable prototype. We're going to define the clicks through the prototype. We're then going to build out our interaction states, and we're going to structure our pages and labels for that experience flow. So let's get moving on to expand our clickable prototype. Let's expand our wireframe by building out the steps of our clickable prototype. Building a clickable prototype is about designing each interaction. Therefore, anywhere your user clicks to move through the prototype needs to be designed for its interaction, i.e., navigation states should change, etc. Open up your wireframe doc. For your convenience, we will be prototyping a clickable desktop experience first, using the prototyping tool Envision. Go to envisionapp.com and sign up for a trial. There are other prototyping tools like Marvel, Proto.io. There's a number of them. However, we're going to be using Envision as it's industry accepted and used at many places with great UX lineage. So go and sign up for an account. Good. We will be using it to build our clickable test. In our plan, let's move from the homepage landing to the product page to the product detail to adding to the shopping cart and viewing it in the shopping cart, which maps to our pages that we've built out in the wireframes. In the production page, make sure to change the navigation to indicate that the page has been selected. Copy the product page and show that we're selecting a product. Next, in the detail, copy this page 3 times to show how the user scrolls through each image detail. This will be a loop in the prototype, so we need it to be consistent with the image indication and dots of the image below. A clickable prototype is about allowing users to move through a system and see how aspects of our UI change and how the functionality might work or get modified based on the user interaction. Good. Now, select a window and turn on the artboard tool. We've added some artboards to the details section, but any new page that we needs a new artboard title. We need to move pages around the artboard to include the labels that we are exploring for these artboards, and that they will get exported in that order. Using a numbering system before your titling will allow those, when we export them, to show up in that process, like this. Great. Now that our titles are changed, let's save a new version of our wireframes. Now we need to clean up any discrepancies on the desktop versions of our templates. Go back and make sure type is consistent and include an appropriate increase in size. Great. Make sure that all your page labels are consistent and don't repeat, as we're going to use the export tool to be porting them into the Envision prototype. Up next, we're going to connect and build our clickable prototype using the Envision app. Welcome back. Our website wireframes are starting to flesh themselves out into a flow that we will then be able to build into a prototype using the Envision app that we signed up for in the last section. Plus, it'll allow us to click through and test our experience. In the last video, we fleshed out our clickable flow and labeled all our pages for consistency through the artboards. In this video, we're going to create our prototype using Envision. We're going to export the images and upload them for an organization and an interaction. We're going to create an Envision app prototype for the desktop and upload these exported images. We're then going to use the Envision app to connect and make the clickable sections work. So let's get moving on creating a clickable prototype. Open up your wireframe doc that has your flow from page to page. Let's review our prototype process. We're going to go from the homepage landing to the product page, to the product detail, to the adding of a shopping cart, to the checkout. All of this is we're going to be prototyping on the desktop view. Great. Things are looking strong. Would you agree? Now what we're going to do is we're going to export these pages, these wireframe pages, and put them into a folder to export to InVision. So let's go File, Export. Check the box that says Use Artboard and select Export. Select a new folder inside the root folder for this project and label it GS Prototype version 1. In the Save As document, it has a source file. By selecting Use Artboards, Illustrator will give you a file for each artboard name and keep the file name short when you save to Save As. Select Export PNG. Great. Your images will export to the selected folder. Next, let's review them. Open the folder you just exported your images to. If you labeled your artboards correctly, as we demonstrated, all your tablet flows will be in order. You can scroll through each and see the order in which you are building your prototype. Good. Now we're going to upload these to the InVision app and complete our prototype testing. Go to envisionapp.com and log in. If you haven't logged in or done a trial, sign up now. I'm logged in and I'm going to create a new project. Select the red circle and label your project Ghostly Prototype. Select the desktop as your format and then create your project. Next, we need to drag and drop our screens to be uploaded to InVision. Find the folder and select the desktop screens from your flow. Drag and drop these into InVision, and they will upload. Awesome. It will upload automatically and show you a grid of the list of your screens. The grid is your hub, and you can select into any screen and build your ability to select between pages. Select the home page. It zooms up and has 4 buttons at the bottom: Preview, Build, Comment, and History. InVision app is a powerful collaborative tool for teams that are working together on interaction projects that they can build together and communicate about. For our convenience, we're going to be using the Build tool. Select it here. Here is where you can build and create hot buttons areas that act like clickable areas on your web page. Build a button space over your navigation. You can see that the button tool comes up and has a few features, like where does the button go? Its size, okay. How does it accomplish it? Does it have a click or a rollover? And what does it do? Is there a transition or is there a way to do that? And it allows you to say, when you click here on the page, you can go to this next page. These are all modifiable for your convenience and allows us to build out navigation and build a clickable space to move around our website. You can create a navigation that's a template so it can be copied between pages, and we'll continue to do that now. The user will click into the content grid, and if you hold down Shift, you can jump to that page as you click between pages. Good. Now we need to make a way to go back. Repeat this button for the navigation, and now you can select the eye icon and the button disappears. But it's still active, and you can go from page to page. There are only active buttons, so they will be the only place on your page that you will be allowed to click. Let's now complete our flow using these build tools. There should be no dead ends in your system or in your prototype, and your system should be able to get you to move through from the home page through to the checkout and back. Great. All of your navigation should go into a consistent template so I can click between pages, and any content that takes me to a deeper page, make that a button itself. We established our prototype plan, and now we're testing to see if our pages and InVision can get us around that process. When you're done, your prototype should operate something like this. Click back on the eye tool and watch. See how I can move from page to page by clicking? Because I've built the tools with InVision. While clicking around the pages, if you notice any consistency in your pages, you can switch back into Illustrator and modify your wireframe assets, buttons, etc., and then export again and upload to replace those pages. InVision keeps a history of changes, but you can also copy over the same file with the same file name and it'll just replace the image. It is advisable to save versions of your flow so that you don't destroy your source files. I usually version any new export even if there are minor changes to that original prototype. File management and version control can be incredibly important as your InVision prototypes can get more complicated or robust than the experience we're walking through now. Explore the app a little more and see if you can implement any, header information. You can fix a header so that your navigation always stays when you scroll. There's also some other opportunities to do some things that show states and actions. InVision is an incredibly powerful tool for testing your ideas and building it out. Building out clickable prototypes with the InVision app or any other prototyping tool is to get you and your user engaged in the act of following the content and walking through an experience. And it allows you to pressure test your own experience and flow for what experience you were building. Most of user experience is about the end-to-end experience, and tools like clickable prototyping of InVision allow us to experience the system ourselves as we build them. They are thinking tools, allowing us to experience the process at which we are building. A static wireframe can be made so much more useful when placed into a prototyping tool as it builds the ecosystem and the system at which we're designing for. A prototype helps us sense and illustrate how it solves the problem. Prototypes, like the primitive one we have here that we just ran through, can now be iterated on and improved quicker. We can share it with our teams, we can put it in front of users. But apps like InVision, you can now share with a team and receive contextual feedback, as well as allow early solutions to feel the experience and become more real. In user experience, there's a premise to prototype first, and you will be able to solve so many more issues faster rather than baking them into the code. I hope your prototype is allowing you to explore and think about your website and see issues and stuff that you would want to fix or want to improve. Up next in this section 10 of this course, Lean UX and the iteration process. Welcome back to the final section of our course, User Experience for Web Developers. We have really made a lot of improvements and learned a lot about user experience over the last 9 sections. In the previous section, we started to flush out and build a clickable prototype for the desktop version of our responsive website and all the wireframes that we created for that. In this section, we'll be growing our web design skills and wrapping up this course. We will be relating to lean user testing. We'll be testing our prototype. We'll be iterating and improving based on our tests, and we'll review this UX course. So let's get going. Our prototype in the last section is a small piece of the pie for much of what our user is going to be experiencing. But many prototypes end up being tests and examples. The goal is learning from prototyping and is to test ideas quickly and validate that solutions are worth coding. With more time, you could prototype each section of the responsive site that could be shared before fully engaging and developing in code. This includes looking at how the tablet and the desktop and the mobile work together. So far, we have built a semi-robust, clickable prototype that can be experienced and used by others. The next step is, well, you got it, to test it. Lean methodology is an organizational structure that keeps small teams and learning paramount and has become a powerful principle in many entrepreneurs and startups. As a growing user experience designer, you should know how your team is organized and how you will help, if not only to communicate about the importance of user experience, but also how to help with testing and validating your ideas, which is a great process and what prototyping is all about. Since we have created a prototype, let's test it. Envision app will help us test our prototype quickly and is a way to measure and validate our user experience decisions along the way. User testing is an essential tool for user experience as it fits into the lean method. Remember to always test your prototypes. There are 5 points to remember when testing your prototypes, and you can find them at adaptivelab.com, 5 principles for lean UX testing. 1, they are user experience is not fine sandpaper. User experience is not a layer on top. It is at the DNA of your solutions. 2, test early and test often. Tests can be performed using your prototype along the way. You can ask your friends, and it doesn't have to be long and hard to validate your thinking. 3, choose your test measures carefully. You are validating a hypothesis, so keep in mind that your prototype test is attempting to solve a question. Number 4, test the minimum product, not the maximum. You'll hear multiple times MVP, the minimum viable product. And a lot of times, prototyping allows us to test the minimum testable product. As you know, we are not testing the entire responsive web design in our prototype. However, we can still learn and iterate on the smaller prototype we have built through the desktop. Your coworker is not your user. This is incredibly important. Attempting to test your prototype on newbies to your problem is not necessarily helpful. If your only user test is with your coworkers who are also working on the same problem, you will get biased feedback. UX requires you to consider your audience, so attempt to use them as your testers. Prototyping and lean user testing is about walking the walk and talking the talk of how user experience can improve a product or website. We do the best that we can and learn and use best practices. We familiarize ourselves with UI patterns, but if we don't get in the habit of validating and testing our solutions, we are just doing a small piece of user experience design. User testing is an essential part of not only learning about our user, but also about giving us as user experience design a way to validate our solutions, whether they worked or not. Up next, testing your prototype, exploring how to test. Welcome back. I hope you're starting to relate how user testing and prototyping is an essential part of user experience. We have started to define our clickable prototype and build out our experience using Envision app. In this video, we're going to improve our clickable prototype by testing. We'll review and run through the clickable prototype. We'll define some testing metrics, and we'll share our prototype and test. We'll then record and modify. So let's get moving on testing our clickable prototype. Let's open up our Envision app prototype and run through it to make sure everything works. Log into Envision, select your prototype, and click through each page and each link to make sure that it works. Navigation should all work, there should be no dead ends, should be able to explore through the site that you've built. Can you go to the previous section with ease? If not, then your test subject will probably get lost too. So we need to fix any dead ends and make sure that it's clear to get around the site using Envision. Great. Now your prototype is ready to go for a dry run. Let's go back to our home page and establish a few metrics for our test. 1. Can the user get from the home page to purchasing a product? 2. Does your user get lost at any point? 3. Does the user click on any unwanted or unnecessary links or aspects that you haven't set up? Okay, those seem like some good metrics. Now we have a few things to follow up on our test subject. Using the Envision Share tool, send a link to anyone you want to help test your prototype. In the body of the email, we need to give our potential test subjects some direction. Please use this prototype to navigate to product A. Add the product to the cart and check out and purchase the product. We're going to take our user through our process that goes from the landing page to the product detail, to adding to the shopping cart, to putting it in the checkout. Assure your user that this is just a prototype and that you are looking for some fresh feedback, and see if they can accomplish your task. If they've never used Envision before, you can kindly ask them to leave any notes using your Envision tool. The more people that you could send this to, the better. If you have people that do this kind of work, great. And you can hit send. There are many ways to user test your prototypes, from paper prototyping to clicking on A/B tests on live code. When you test early and often, you can get your product to improve faster. And this allows your user experience to seep into the web early and then last throughout the development. Great user experience decisions are validated through user testing and have the ability to last and can improve your website and product faster. Hopefully, the test subjects you send things through send you back some great feedback. Up next, let's validate and iterate our prototype using some of the outcomes to improve our experience. Welcome back. Our website prototypes are starting to get pressure tested through the shares that you sent out using the Envision app. Hopefully, you're getting some feedback on your prototype through the Notes tool. In this video, we're going to improve and iterate our prototype based on the feedback through Envision. We'll review our user test, we'll gather some feedback, and then we'll go modify and iterate our wireframes, and then update our Envision and test again. So let's get moving on interacting and improving our website design and prototype. Open our website prototype in Envision. You can track comments here through the comment tool. When I ran the test, I got a few comments. Let's review my notes. 1. Your navigation is too small. Okay. It was hard to scroll between product detail images. All right. Your checkout form was very boring and labels and forms are too small. Interesting. All of these notes seem valid, like valid user concerns, and we can go address them in our wireframes. Let's open up our wireframe folder and save a new version. Go to the desktop flow and look at home page, product page, etc. Let's start with the navigation being too small. Take a look. The type is at 14 points based on best practices. But we got some complaints, so let's increase it to 18 points to make sure that it doesn't get missed and that it's all copied and the pages are good. Great. Next, the images are hard to switch between. This could be because the user just can't see the small arrows. I'm going to solve this by making this details section a carousel of images so that each image on the left and the right can stick out a little bit, like this. So rather than the arrows, you can kind of see that stuff pokes through. This iteration will also require a test, but for the time being, we're attempting to solve the visibility issue expressed by our tester. The forms are too small. We attempted to place all the forms on the page that did not scroll. We demonstrated usability for visibility, and now we can fix it. Scrolling is usually not a difficult task, so let's increase all the labels and the forms boxes, like this. Now we have addressed all the comments of our test. However, these iterations have only been set in the desktop version of our responsive website for our prototype flow. If you want, you can go iterate all the instances of the mobile and desktop view. Sometimes iterating on all screens is what makes designing in responsive web design more challenging and a longer cycle. But good. Now that we have made those adjustments, let's export our screens and create a new prototype or modify the existing prototype we have. Go to Export and export your pages to a new folder called GS Prototype version 1.2, just like we did for the first version. Great. Now that we have iterated our desktop flow from homepage landing to product page to product detail to add shopping cart, and then checkout, let's import these changes to our existing Envision app prototype that is modifying on the changes that we were suggested. You can drag your images over the top of your pages and it will replace those pages using the Envision download tool. Great. Go through each page and replace the screens where we made modifications based on the feedback. If you replace the pages, it will maintain the clickable buttons and hotspots that you allowed in your original prototype. Envision app maintains a history function for each page, so don't fret, your screens are not gone. You can go into your settings and find the older pages. Great. Go through the page and iterate your experience. Now we can do a test run and run the pages through the sections we iterated upon. Now we have an opportunity to improve our navigation size. We iterated on the product detail, and we built out the forms for our checkout. Iteration is at the heart of user experience, and user testing iteration can quickly and efficiently build better and more accurate web experiences. Plus, it becomes cheaper to do it early and often. User experience is the end-to-end experience. If you assume that you make the right decisions all the time, you frankly will build bad user experiences. User experience requires iteration and testing as it allows us to quickly improve an experience for a product or a website. Our ability to receive feedback and then review that feedback against our experience and our user experience skills will improve our overall user experience for a website. It also helps us as practitioners of the user experience process, and it helps us to improve and learn about how we solve problems. User experience is a consistent cycle, and you should use it to improve and build the best user experience possible. Up next in this course, a user experience review. Hello, and welcome to the last video of this user experience for developers course. You have successfully navigated your way through user experience for developers. In this video, we're going to take a quick look back and review what we've accomplished over the 10 sections of this course. We're going to review the UX tasks that we accomplished. We're going to review some of the skills you've learned. We'll overview the end product that you've created. and then we'll send you off into the big bad world for continuing to learn about user experience and how to make great websites. So let's wrap it up. In the past 10 sections, we started from scratch. We started at the place of what is user experience. And now you are a grizzled veteran, right? Well, no. But you do have a foundation on which to build and improve your user experience, skills, and acumen. We've learned that user experience is a process which starts with a human-centered task and moves through planning and then into wireframing and then into prototyping and then returns to the human factor of testing. Our cycle took the 10 sections of this course, and we learned the fundamentals of responsive web design and interaction all the way along the process. And we learned how to improve and build a great user experience. We improved our ability to have empathy for our user, and we learned about how to structure and define a website through information architecture. Through the process, we gained some knowledge about best practices and usability that we applied to our wireframing, and we followed a mobile-first strategy and built out our wireframes and a clickable prototype that captured our thinking and learning for the website we redesigned. Let's take a look at what we have. We built a sitemap that we monitored and maintained and modified. We used a user flow to understand how a user moves from point A to point B through a website. We created a set of responsive wireframes for every major template of the website. We then took those wireframes and built a prototype plan and a wireframe flow for our prototype. We exported those prototypes to build a clickable prototype using InVision, and we tested that prototype and iterated on it. All of these are part of building a great user experience, and they can be improved and elaborated on over time. You will find that if you continue to do this, you'll speed up this process and be able to go from sketch to prototype in a much faster manner. Thank you for learning about user experience with me, your guide, Chris Becker. I am confident that if you stick to the skills and tasks outlined in this course, you will not only find that you are enjoying what you're working on, but you will also improve the experience for your users. You will show how user experience adds value at the beginning and keeps things cheap and decisions validated. User experiences is about the ethos that can be applied to not only just web designs, but how and why you work and how your impact and thinking can change based on thinking about your user and testing with that same user. User experience is a vast and growing set of skills, which we only got to touch on a few of them. Experiences and tasks are kept for improving, and learning in this course is only a small piece of the user experience pie and path. If you enjoyed this course as much as I enjoyed teaching it and putting it together for you, please share with anyone who is interested in UX or gaining more knowledge about the user experience process. And you can follow me on Twitter at @cbecker. And with the skills you've learned in this course, go out and build great user experience for the web. And thank you. Good luck.